Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. This show is always live and it's broadcast from our studios right here in Johannesburg between 9 and 12 every weekday morning. We're also live on this very channel. You can interact with us, of course, on all of our social media platforms today. Well, our theme today is we're dealing with racism. And our question is, in your view, what amounts to racism? That's the question we asked today. Of course, it is a question that, well, the president dealt with a little bit earlier in the week. Let's have a look at the president's view before we start.
He also dealt with current issues. For an example, the issue of racism that seems to be emerging. But we thought it was important to clarify that South Africa is not a racist country. South Africa is a non-racial country. There are few individuals who must be having that problem. And that's how we should talk about it. We should not exaggerate and begin to make the world believe that South Africa has now suddenly become a racist country. Not at all. Few individuals, and I'm sure even those who made some funny statements, may not be more than 5 really, which tells you where the country is. So we thought it was important to address that issue and also to ask the ANC members and the population to really campaign against such tendencies because they are taking us backward.
That's the president's view on the sensitive issue of racism. Now, we'll talk about this at length, but first, let's get into the morning's news headlines with our Vice President.
The student leaders who walked out of a meeting with the Higher Education Minister Bladen Zamande say they'll need to re-strategize as yesterday's meeting did not go as they had hoped. The Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has defended government's new tax legislation which will see the state regulating the way workers access their retirement funds. And Eskom has issued a warning to the public to be aware of a recruitment scam. Those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Elvis, a hearty good morning to you, and good morning to you at home as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
One swinging back late as well, full.
The Proteas have it all to do on day 2 of the third test against England after stuttering to 267 for 7 at stumps yesterday. Overshadowing their cricket on the pitch yesterday was the breaking of the news that former Protea Ghulam Bodhi is the figure at the centre of the Ram Slam T20 match-fixing scandal. We'll go deeper into that story with Jody Hendricks.
Knowledge of the problems with Russia was far wider than has been acknowledged, and that the IAAF had displayed no genuine appetite to deal with the problems.
The second water report on organised doping in the IAAF is released, and the trail leads right to the top of the food chain. Mark Omer joins us to uncover some of the hidden truths. And that's what we've got for you in the sport. Be sure to be around for that 10:20. It's when it gets exciting again. Back to you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you very much to you, Kendall. Now, it's been a start to the year where race debates dominated both mainstream and social media. Now, in the most recent one earlier this week with racial undertones, a tense standoff ensued outside the Parys Magistrates Court where 4 farmers appeared for the murder of 2 black men. The farmers are accused of assaulting the 2 men who they suspected had attacked another farmer the week before. The 2 suspects subsequently died from their injuries. Police outside the court used barbed wire to separate a group of farmers from protesting ANC and EFF members. The EFF and the ANC claimed that the alleged intruders were farm workers who had gone there to collect their wages when they were assaulted. Some ANC members were singing Kill the Boer, while farmers carrying the Defika flag sang Distem. Now, the man who was on the scene right there is SABC investigative reporter Jacques Steenkamp, who's with us in studio today. A very good morning to you, Jacques. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Eben.
This one had real racial undertones on the back of what's been a tough month for social cohesion in South Africa, if one can call it that. Just recap the kind of story that developed outside the Paris Magistrates Court?
Well, basically, it's alleged that 72-year-old Louis van der Westhuizen was attacked on his farm, Bissiesbilt, last Wednesday. Apparently, the two men pistol whipped him. He was taken to hospital. He was treated. He got stitches, the old man now. But apparently, they demanded 20,000 rand. So he pressed the panic button. He managed to press the panic button, which mobilized the local farming community. According to the investigating officer, Isaac Chabalala, these guys fled for about 5-6 kilometers. They were chased by these farmers where they were assaulted and then handed over to the police, and they died in hospital later. So the police then arrested these four men, saying it was murder. So on Tuesday was the bail application. The EFF has since said that these guys were workers. There was a lot of people, a lot of ANC members, a lot of EFF members, and then a lot of farmers. And the police had to, separate all the different factions by, like you said, barbed wire, to keep them from fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Especially the ANC members and the farmers. The ANC members pointed their fingers, made pistols with their hands, basically, showing it to the farmers who were carrying the field clear. So both factions provoked each other. Like one faction saying, "Kill the boer, kill the farmer," while the other faction sang "Desem," like you said. And at one point, the police actually had to use force to remove the farmers away from the ANC members to try and stop violence from breaking out.
Now, one has to point out that these are small minorities, but how did things escalate so quickly outside this specific case? Is it on the back of long-standing tensions?
I think it's the tension as well, but I think that's what's happening in the country at the moment with the racism issue. I think that's just flared up, and a lot of people are angry and they're frustrated. And I think what happened, the killing of these two farm workers, or alleged farm workers or farm attackers, the death of them, it just infuriated everybody. So I think there's a lot of pent-up frustration that we're seeing, as we especially saw on Tuesday.
Give us a little bit of more context on this story, Jacques. I know you've been following it and you've been covering it on social media channels and so forth. What's the context of the story, and where is it going to go next, do you think?
The problem is that, from what the investigating officer testified, there's no evidence. There's no evidence that linking the four people they arrested directly to this. From what we understand is that when these guys caught the two attackers, they summoned the police. It was after the assault took place. And the police showed up. And when the police showed up, a bunch of farmers just left the area. And only the four farmers remained. And they were then subsequently arrested for the act. But the investigating officer testified there's got no eyewitnesses, there's no evidence, no DNA, nothing to prove their case. So subsequently, the case has now been postponed for a month. Initially, their defense attorneys did ask that the magistrate, Leshni Pillay, drops the case, that she basically, scraps the case from the roll because of a lack of evidence. But she granted them bail, and they'll have to return on the 12th of February. So the police basically will have to now investigate and see if they can come up with any evidence. But from what I saw personally, I can't see whether the charges will stick.
We've seen a lot of racial incidents over let's call it the festive season into the new year on social media and in the mainstream media in recent times. Where do we place this incident? People talk about race war, but that's not really the case. This is a scenario of vested interest, one would think.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the farming community is very angry. They're saying farmers, the government doesn't care. So from this incident, the farmers took the law in their own hands, basically. They tried to protect one of their own, and in the end, they killed two people. So I don't know where we go from here, but I mean, because it's white on black, the racial issue has come up again and flared up, and people are very angry. I mean, even on my social media account, while I was tweeting what's happening, people reacted. They were fighting with one another, basically responding to what I said, and one faction saying, no, but this is right, the other faction saying that is right, and it just continued like that all day.
Do you feel that social media now gives every racist a platform to continue that sort of abusive behavior, or to even anonymously be able to be more racist in the world today? Indeed,
I think most people won't stand in front of other persons and say that, or say that in public.
Yeah.
But with social media, as you well know, you can basically hide your identity, and therefore you can say what you want, because nobody can basically prove it's you that said that. So it does create, like what they mentioned, trolls on social media. And because of that, I mean, we're going to see more of this. It's not going to die down, because there's no way to control this.
And what was if you had to listen to the message of all three groups really that were outside the magistrates court in Paris, what was the message that they each tried to get across?
I think justice, most likely. I think the farming community, like I just said, very frustrated by, like I say, the police don't care about farm attacks and stuff.
Yeah.
And they reckon they were justified in their actions. And I think the ANC and the EFF wants justice for the two deaths of the two alleged farm workers or farm attackers. So I think justice, most likely. But because, like I say, the racial undertones that's happening in the country as of late, this all just flared up.
Well, Jacques, thank you very much for joining us. An interesting case, of course. There you see the picture of the 4 accused in this specific case. We'll continue with our discussion around issues of race here in South Africa. Of course, it's been a topic on everyone's list. We've had 5 or 6, maybe even more incidents like that on social media. We ask you a question. This week we've had these incidents. What, in your view, what amounts to racism? Some people say, yeah, we're oversensitive. Others say, no. This is a very sensitive issue, and there's the issues of hurt that people have to deal with, historical context, all these kinds of scenarios that come into play. Social media, though, has been the big talking point in recent times with regards to race. Alvis now has an interesting interview that puts it into context.
Some call it the rise of social media in the context of racial slurs. Joining us now in studio to talk about the legal implications of posting something offensive on social media, we are joined in studio by Khomotso Makapane, a partner at Bowman and Gilfillan. A very good morning to you, Khomotso, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for
Mr. Makapane, first and foremostly, and the very first question that probably in everybody's lips is, do we have laws that govern people that go on social media and commit racism online?
I think previously I used to say we don't have laws directly, but I think the answer now must change to say we actually do have laws, although not laws which were promulgated originally to deal with social media. But we actually do have laws emanating from the common law, which ought to be developed in line with the Constitution to deal with social media.
And what is that law, if you can just break it down for us in terms of the common law, and how would it impact then on social media?
Okay, I think we have, for example, the law of defamation. We have government having enacted what we call prevention of unfair discrimination. And we also have vicarious liability, where the employer-employee relationships also comes into the equation. And all those laws, as I indicated, the Constitution says must be interpreted in line with the Constitution, and it must be developed take into account the social context.
We're trying to get a timeline, and we can see the Penny Sparrow comment there that we saw just now, and of course there was Chris Hart and Velapi Kumalo. There's a number of these incidents that happened on social media over the festive period. What are some of the legal consequences and implications of posting something offensive on social media?
First of all, you may be sued. It must be understood that every right one has, including the right to freedom of speech, has an accompanying or corresponding responsibility. So people need to understand that either in their personal capacity or when they run social sites for companies, that whatever is put there, they need to also look into the responsibility part of it. Secondly, the Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act prevents any sort of abusive language, hate speech, that may be used both by state and any other person, irrespective of race. And also it prevents propagation. So, for example, in the social media context, say tweet or Facebook, if you like a page or you retweet, you might be propagating hate speech. So the people need to be careful about those kind of things.
So it's guilty by association?
It's not necessarily guilty by association. It is understanding that when you retweet, you are furthering a publication, and therefore actually you are saying, I agree with this publication. So as a result, but for you, the next person would not have read that tweet or got that post. So that it is not by association, it is deliberate.
That's a very fine line, because that is what Diane Kohler-Barnard argued, that she didn't read the entire post. She just read the first part of the post, and therefore she got into hot water. So you cannot claim innocence.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Now, can employers police the use of social media without infringing on an individual's right? Is that possible?
A lot of employers do. The only question really is to make sure that the right to privacy and integrity is protected in the process. Whether or not whatever you find can be used in a court of law at a disciplinary hearing, it's a different question altogether, because whatever is obtained through that process is going to have to be checked against the prevailing legislation relating to use of private information.
Should organizations perhaps offer workshops or workshops in media training in terms of social media, how to utilize it? And should they also have a media policy, a social media policy in place?
A lot of companies actually do have a social media policy, and the only issue they do is they do not do educational workshops in respect of this. But also, for a long time, it has just been an issue because we have not had this kind of cases before. For the first time now in South Africa, we have live examples of how social media or use of social media can get people into hot water. So it then gives context and reality to these workshops, and I think people are starting to take it serious now. And those social media policies that have been gathering dust are now coming out, and people are looking at them again and looking at the implications.
Now, if you tweet as an individual and telling people that was your expression of your freedom of expression, can that be linked to your employer, and can your employer take steps against you, even if you did it in your own capacity?
Penny Sparrow is a clear example on this, and there are many other recent examples as well, where when people find something hateful about your speech or about your tweet or your post, they immediately go into LinkedIn, they check the employer, and before you know it, it is tweeting, Bowman Gilflin partner saying something hateful. And it is very easy. So the context here is where you do something even in your private capacity, if it can be linked to your employer in any other way, then your employer may also take action against you, because now they are brought into the whole scheme of things. So what social media has done essentially is it has almost bridged the divide between personal space or private space and company space.
How do we make that clear distinction between freedom of speech and hate speech, especially for people just out there making a comment?
I think it is actually not as complicated as people make it out to be. The moment you say a comment which may reasonably be construed to be hurtful or harmful to a person, either on the basis of race or sex, then you shouldn't make it. It's as simple as that.
In the case of Penny Sparrow, is that a civil matter or perhaps a criminal matter?
I think it is a matter that may fall under Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, which in terms of that act says it must be dealt with through the criminal courts. So it must be referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Your advice to social media users?
You have the right to freedom of speech, but as the Constitution says, those rights are limited. Also think of your responsibilities. If you're unsure about a comment, just don't tweet it or don't post it.
Mr. Makapane, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. That was Komotso Makapane. He's a partner at Bowman and Gilfillan. Did I get that right? Right, it's over to you. And remember that we're also asking you a very important question today. This question is a question that we're going to explore the entire program, well, almost say the entire day, but the entire duration of our program here in Newsroom. We're asking you, in your view, what amounts to racism? It's over to you, Evan.
Yeah, that's our question of the day. Of course, it's all of our responsibility to help build the nation. Social cohesion. We should all be activists for social cohesion. Last night's our sister program, Cutting Edge, had a documentary about Orania. Now, Orania is an Afrikaner-only South African town located along the Orange River in the arid Karoo region of the Northern Cape province. It sparked outrage again on social media today, as some people say they weren't even aware of this town. Let's have a look at some of the tweets, what people have been saying about this. Of course, race debates have been very much at the top of people's minds. And Jabulu Tele says, I guess I missed that Orania show. The place always fascinated me. Yes, it fascinates most people in South Africa. Then Thick Madame says, didn't know they had their own currency. Which banks accept the aura as a valid currency? And what is the value of the aura versus the rand? Very, very interesting, that is. Michael Koss talks about, can we just forget about Orania, though? In my eyes, it's not even considered to be a part of South Africa. Does it mean a part of South Africa or a part of the country? Lindiwe Mkonza says, but I blame myself as well. I knew about the existence of Orania. I even saw a Chicken Licken ad about it and laughed. And honestly, it's not funny. That's the view of Lindiwe Mkonza. Now, today's picture of the day. Let's take a look at that. There you have an incredible shot. It comes from Tebe Dad Kiameditse, and it's captioned "Dust Sandstorm in Mahikeng." What a wonderful picture that is, and it's certainly something out of the ordinary here in South Africa. It looks like the Sahara Desert there outside of Mahikeng. Of course, it's been very dry all around South Africa, all around southern Africa, really, over the last 3 to 6 months. So that's part of the effects that the drought is having. Let's go around the world now quickly and have a look at what some of the newspapers, the main newspapers, are saying. We start with the International New York Times, and it reports that the Islamic State claimed responsibility for a terrorist attack in the Indonesian capital on Thursday, raising the specter of an expanded presence by the group in Southeast Asia. Then, moving to Israel, the Jerusalem Post says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slams Sweden's Foreign Minister Margot Wallström, characterizing her recent statements that called for an investigation of Israel's extrajudicial killings as outrageous, immoral, unjust, and just wrong. Then the Times in Europe reports a state-owned Russian bank paid $25 million to the World Athletics governing body after officials arranged to cover up widespread doping by the country's athletes. That was revealed in a report there yesterday. Around the world, time now for us to take a short break. Our question of the day deals with racism. Send us your tweets. We'd love to hear what they say. We'll take this one a notch up after the break when Elvis talks to an expert, Dr. Leonard Martin, on this topic of racism. See you then.
Media Monitor, your weekly media news review program.
It was squashed some few months back, but obviously this is something that is going to hang around Pravin until it is actually dealt with. If he didn't know, then he wasn't doing his job.
In it, she described how the man's hair was frozen, although the man has no hair.
Is anybody volunteering to go to jail for him? That is not how the law works.
This particular matter makes us really look like a serious banana republic.
Unpacking headlines and giving analysis on topical issues. Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom. Now remember that we're asking you a very important question today, and that question, to relate to our topic and our theme for the day, we're asking you, in your view, what amounts to racism? Now let's give you an explanation perhaps. Racism exists when one ethnic group or historical collectivity dominates, excludes, or seeks to eliminate another on the basis of differences that it believes are hereditary and unchangeable. Now that is the academic perspective. Dr. Leonard Martin's doctoral research into racialism, titled The Origination and the Meaning of a Racialist Order, an Anti-Racist Genealogy of Western Power and State Formation as a Hegemonic Civilizational Paradigm, is a critical study into the origination and the sources of Western racial ideas. Now to discuss his doctoral research, Origins of Racialism, which was based on the historical and social study of origins of racialism with a focus on Africa. We have in studio Dr. Leonard Martin. A very good morning to you and welcome, sir.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners, Elvis.
Now, it does sound like a mouthful, but what is racialism vis-a-vis racism? Is there a difference?
You know, we can give easy answers to these very weighty, and one would even say blood-soaked concepts. But racialism refers to the accumulative system or systemic developments around an organizational idea of race. Race is an idea of organizing society. And of course, it has its social effects, and it has its own ideologies. So there is a distinction, racism as a set of acts, and racialism as a cumulative system that has been woven into certain priorities of a particular society or colonial societies.
Now, your doctorate, which was published, was based on the historical and social study of the origins of racialism. Take us through the context of your study.
I wish I could take you through in a few minutes, but let me put it this way. In summary, it deals with the origin of sources and their contexts. Now, when one says sources, one has to go to the original writings of where these ideas emanate from and the social and political context that made these ideas relevant. And my book really starts in a very contradictory way with who populated Europe. And it ends with the demise of apartheid in South Africa. Now, we all know there are huge gaps in the development of identities. But we have to start at the origins. And that's why I chose the term, the origination and meaning, because the first peoples of Europe emerged from southern Africa. They were known as the Grimaldi people. Now, these are gaps in the development of the understanding of who Europeans are. But as we are speaking, there are still diggings going on in southern Europe on these issues, and they are no longer in dispute. Clearly, the people from Europe originated in Africa. So the origins of humankind are simultaneously the origins of the treaties I deal with in my book.
So what you are suggesting is that there is no distinction between Africans and Europeans or any other race
well,
for that matter?
The greatest lie was that you have something called a pure human being relating to blood. Africans were in Europe and populated Europe first, and most moral paleontologists and other scientists will no longer dispute that. So the notion of somebody of pure blood is ideological fiction that grew up with the notion of conquest.
Now, the apartheid regime failed in its bid to divide us here in South Africa, but have we reconciled as a nation after 1994?
Again, there's an easy answer. And the easy answer is, the trickster who poses the question, is the zebra a zebra with white stripes or a zebra with black stripes? Now, that mode of argumentation appears to be the contradiction of discourse in South Africa at the moment. And let me run ahead and say, in as much as it's appealing to say that South Africa is a zebra with white stripes, others would say South Africa is a zebra with black stripes, and we can move to and fro without actually developing the knowledge of what progress, and unique progress, this country has made in terms of destroying the most pernicious idea of, a society that was pregnant with all the fantasies of imperialism that were practiced in this country, racial imperialist fantasies. So we have moved on, and we are still moving on. We are a work in progress, and I think in terms of the discourses, it's always a tricky and a very sensitive issue to deal with the language of race and to analyze ourselves forward. You can get trapped. But the important point, I think, which we have to bear in mind is what knowledge are we developing ourselves in terms of the discourses, pro and contra, in relation to what progress we are making.
Now, I know that we need a lot more time to discuss the concept of racialism, but from your research, what are the lessons that we can learn as a country in South Africa moving forward and to achieve that magnificent dream that Madiba had of a rainbow nation?
You see, to me, the key non-racial moment was the re-emergence of Nelson Mandela and all the benefits, not only to South Africa, but to Africa that emerged. It's like seeing Obama being elected president. Whichever way we want to look, the racial mold has been broken in terms of the two major societies. Remember, South Africa used to be called the USA, the Union of South Africa. There's a paradox there. But I think we've made major strides in the sense that apartheid has been destroyed. And the president was correct to say South Africa is no longer a racist state, but we're left with legacies and ideologies. I mean, you've been flashing certain images of flags in front of the magistrate's court, and what does that tell you is that we are digging up old narratives that have no place in this country any longer.
Dr. Martin, I wish we could have an hour, but that's where we got to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us here. That was Dr. Leonard Martin, a social commentator who discussed his doctoral research, the origination and the meaning of a racialist order, and anti-racist genealogy of Western power and state formation as a hegemonic civilization paradigm. It's a mouthful, but that concept we are talking through today because we're asking a very important question to you. What do you think is racism? Let us know what's on your mind. It's over to you, Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, here's the question on your screen. In your view, what amounts to racism? I think for every individual, it might be something different. We're such a diverse country here in South Africa. Do these old brands of days gone by still belong here? Well, we've got somebody who can talk about it. Brand South Africa undoubtedly suffers every time when there's a racist comment or a racist view on social media or old flags being pulled out and so forth. Now, this follows the inflammatory comments, of course, by our former DA member, Penny Sparrow. Standard Bank economist Chris Hart was also in the spotlight, as well as a Gauteng Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation Department employee, Velaphi Kumalu, over racist tweets on Facebook. Now, to talk to us about the implications for Brand South Africa, we are joined in studio by Tebe Ikalafeng, the founder of the Brand Leadership Group. He's arguably the foremost global African branding and reputation architect, advisor, and author. Good morning.
Good morning, Eben.
Lovely to have you with us as always.
Thank you so much.
Before we go into what this means for the brand, I want to, as a South African, what do you make of what's been going on in South Africa the last 3 weeks or month or over the festive season, as some people would say?
Well, I think what's been happening is an awakening of an incomplete project called Brand South Africa. Because I think in the 21 years that we've lived under perhaps an illusion of a perfect society.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing now, you'll be seeing the unraveling of that perfect society. The ideals are there, but the reality is beginning to bite us.
You talk about perfection, but perfection is quite often just an ideal. Should we as South Africans agree that we can be perfect in our imperfection as a society, and social cohesion should really be the activism that we're striving for?
Of course. You know, this brand South Africa, or this idea of a South Africa, was cemented in several places. The Freedom Charter of 1955 laid the foundation of the type of society that South Africa can become. And that was reinforced when Mandela was made president. I think if you remember his concluding remarks about never, never again shall this society suffer from the indignity among its races. And then this was affirmed further by Desmond Tutu when he spoke about, in 1996, I think, where the conclusion of the Constitution.
Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Truth and Reconciliation, but at the sign-off of the Constitution, when he said a rainbow nation finally at peace with itself.
Yeah.
We can strive to be a better nation because we've got the fundamental pillars of that. Endemic to what South Africa is tolerance, is diversity, and is inclusiveness.
Damage is caused whenever it seems as if we inflict this damage on ourselves. But I think it has to be made clear to everybody, especially people across the continent. This is the minority. There's no doubt that there's a minority that's making it very difficult for the rest of South Africa to come to terms with this dream.
Well, it's not just about racism, actually. If you recall the xenophobic attacks of last year, this is just another manifestation of the instability, or if you will, the incompleteness of our process to transform the Republic of South Africa. What I remember vividly the president saying last year, and I agree with him, that one of the things that South Africa has failed to deal with in its 21-year history is to be able to tell South Africans, or to encourage encourage South Africans or to mobilize South Africans to understand that the struggle or the way, the mode of fighting that brought us here is not the same as that which will take us into the future. So taking us into the future is this respect for diversity, respect, tolerance for difference and all those. So I think our challenge as a country, is really how do we build a cohesive nation which all belongs or strives for the same ideal. I think as a country, that is the one big challenge that we have. We have focused on many other things, grants, social grants, if you will, providing houses, providing roofs,
closing the inequality gap.
But what we should have done, we should have also focused on bringing all South Africans together.
The reality is we are here now.
Yes, we are.
We are together, whether we like it or not. We are here now.
We are in it together.
Yeah, as the expert, in your personal capacity, what do you think needs to happen next, and what do you see happening? If you can maybe juxtapose those.
Well, I think the most important thing that needs to happen is to get everybody to understand what is the ideal of South Africa? What does South Africa stand for? Because if you ask everybody what are the values which bring us together as South Africans, not everybody is able to articulate the values which bring us together. So we have a major job to go out and resell the South African story, resell the South African narrative, resell what is it that we want to take future for, not just for us, but also for future generation. So to me, that's the most important thing, agreeing on what the vision of South Africa is, what the values which underpin this country are, and what our role as citizens is in this whole transformation.
The individual, myself, what should I espouse, live every day in order to build that dream or to do the job that you say we have in front of us? The individual, what should we go out and what should we live?
Your job as an individual is to do what Mahatma Gandhi said, is to be the change that you want to see in the world. Your job is to live South Africa every day. Your job is to reach out to your different neighbor, to your unequal neighbor, to your foreign neighbor, and welcome them to South Africa and tell the South African story.
This is a picture that's very concerning. We had this standoff. Old flags, that of course has no place in the South Africa that we're building. How do you view these kinds of images?
Well, these kind of images, they just reinforce the fundamental problem that we have, that we are not all in it together, that we don't all believe in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the idea of the South Africa that we serve. We don't all pledge our allegiance to the flag of South Africa. The fact that you have people who still sing the stamp separately, and people who sing Nkosi Sikelel separately, that people still wave different flags, says the job is not done. It says the biggest job that we need to do as a country is to get everybody behind the symbolism of that flag. You see, the flag is just a piece of, not just a piece of cloth. It is actually the embodiment of the new South Africa.
Should we then, at a governmental level, should we be thinking along the American lines? The flag is outside everyone's house, and it's that symbol that all Americans almost live for. Should we have a similar idea develop within South African homes, maybe?
Oh, indeed. The most important thing we need to do, we need to conscientize South Africans. Do you know, to get to South Africa to where it is, everybody had to be conscientized against the system and for the ideal of South Africa. What we need to do in this country, it is a tragedy that if not every school has got a flag of South Africa flying. It is a tragedy that we don't all sing the national anthem with the same enthusiasm and with the same understanding and in every single environment which represents South Africa. You know, when one thing I said to the president last year during the xenophobic attack, I said, the president, in order to transform South Africa, to reintegrate South Africa into the broader continent, we need to do three most important things. One, we need to adopt the African nation, the African Union flag, because it's going to speak to our identity with the rest of the continent. We need to get everybody to sing the AU anthem that will speak to our understanding of the vision of this continent. And we need to celebrate African Union on 25th of May every year as a public holiday where everybody comes together. We need to do the same job for the Republic of South Africa. If you look at what we do on the 27th of April, we all view it as a holiday.
Yeah.
We don't all rush up and pledge allegiance to South Africa compared to the 4th of November in the US, where they pledge allegiance to the union of the
flag, to the union,
indeed, and to the ideals and to the value. We need to stand together and say, I am South African, and that should mean something.
I thank you, Tebe Kalafeng. That is profound words. I am South Africa. You are South Africa. It's all of our duty to build brand South Africa. It's all of our duty to protect brand South Africa. Of course, in light of recent events, we ask you, in your view, what amounts to racism? Love to hear from you. We'll put it up as soon as they come in. I'm sure you have lots of different views as to what is racism. Of course, perspective is a picture that paints all of it. Yesterday there were some interesting developments on a story that's also in the news here in South Africa. Alvis has got some developments and some comments on it.
And that's so true, Eben. Je suis South Africa. That's me. That's you. That's every one of us. Now, yesterday, leaders walked out during a meeting with the Minister of Higher Education and Training. The students say that the Minister, Nzimande, was not committed to meet their demands. Now let's take a look at some of your comments and your tweets. Please remember to send us your views on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. The first one here from Tsepiso Makwetla says, I am interested in hearing why students walked out when the ministers come down to engage with them. Nanat Tsepiso Makwetla from SAFM, our colleague there, tweeting us there. Jim says, students don't respect #Bladen Nzimande. You can't just walk out on the minister, no matter the differences you have. That is #disrespect. You can't, says Jim. NSFAS funds less than 10% of the university population in South Africa, so spare us the charade, so says this one from Lindani. And then another one here from Leadership says, the #Fees Must Fall campaign has been hijacked by agent provocateurs who want to ensure that no university education takes place. That's at Sakino Kamwendo. That's another colleague of ours at SAFM. Now, you can do the same. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle. And, of course, we're also asking you a very important question where we want you to engage with us all the time during the course of the program. And we ask you this very important question. What is racism? What do you think? Your view. We would like to find it from you. You heard it from Dr. Leonard Martin. You heard some academic explanation of racism. I would like to find it from you. Your view. What amounts to racism? Now, you can let us know on the Facebook page and on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Let's take a look at what is happening on a Newsroom Facebook page today. Here's that one. The leaders who walked out of a meeting with Higher Education Minister Bladen Nzimande say that they did so because the minister is not willing to make any concessions or commitments on addressing their 8 demands. Now, they got 8 demands. We want to know about those 8 demands. Then, the African National Congress caucus in Gauteng says that it's concerned that there are still thousands of learners who are not yet placed in school as a result of late applications and a lack of space. And the husband of the award-winning Canadian singer Celine Dion, René Aguilil, he died yesterday at the age of 73 after a long battle with cancer. She announced that yesterday. That was Celine Dion. There's a picture of them on the Facebook page as well. Now, you can find all these stories and more on our Newsroom Facebook page, or you can visit our SABC website at www.sabc.co.za/news. But we'll first take a break, and we'll come back right after that. Stay tuned.
In the unfortunate event of death, the last thing your family should have to worry about is money.
That is why all clientele funeral plans pay out within 24 hours.
Plus, we will send 200 Rand free airtime to help with the necessary funeral arrangements.
I'm very proud to have given my cousin a decent funeral because that is very important in our culture.
Clientele funeral plans are affordable. They start from just 99 Rand per month.
It's easy to apply. No medical examinations, no paperwork. It includes an unveiling and a grocery benefit.
Important. You can cover up to 13 people on one plan. And on our Ultimate Dignity plan, you can get all your premiums back. Yes, all your money back on top of your cover amount.
I'm very grateful to clientele.
SMS funeral to 47025.
Mancosa, Southern Africa's leading distance learning institution. Accredited, affordable and accessible management education programs. Higher certificates, diplomas, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Register at Mancosa and be part of Southern Africa's leading private business school. Visit our website, mancosa.co.za. Mancosa, management education reimagined.
Welcome back. You're still with us here on SABC News. This, of course, Newsroom. Today we're talking about the sensitive topic of racism and race here in South Africa. The Institute for Justice and Reconciliation is a non-governmental organization and think tank forged out of the country's truth and reconciliation process in the year 2000. The aim was to ensure that lessons learned from South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy were taken into account as the nation moved ahead. The main mission is now to keep reconciliation and social justice on South Africa and Africa's agenda. The Institute has earned international reputation for research of the highest quality, bold policy suggestions and in-depth reconciliation work on the ground. Now, in our Cape Town studios, we have the head of Department Building and Inclusive Society at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, Mr. Stan Hinkeman. Stan, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm sure you've watched most of the program so far. We're dealing with an issue that's constantly at the forefront of South Africans' minds. First, tell me, before we get into the work that you do, how do you view what has been going on in recent times?
Even it's actually quite interesting that we see recurrences of this kind of thing, and every time it happens, and this time in particular, it seems to, the backlash and the pushback seems to be stronger and stronger. In a way, one shouldn't be surprised. We're in a democracy that is now in its 22nd year. But we're talking about mindsets. We're talking about institutionalized ways of looking and observing people that comes in this country in particular over hundreds of years. And so, it's not surprising because these mindsets, the thinking of people in South Africa is so deeply entrenched. And in a way, it has almost become part of the DNA of our society. And so it's not surprising. It is disconcerting. But I think one needs to understand it in that light. The second thing is that it's, if you really think about it, because it gets the press coverage, because it's in the news, because social media takes hold of it, it seems as if it is a pervasive, deep problem. But in essence, it is a group of people who really are in a minority. And I'd like to also say that in our research, in the South African Reconciliation Barometer, there is hope because, more than 70% of South Africans say that they want a united South Africa. They want to be part of a united South Africa. And so it must be seen in context. The fact that it happens is disconcerting, and we have to deal with that, and perhaps we can talk a little bit about some of the things that could potentially be done.
Tell us a little bit about that, but I'm also interested, the Reconciliation Barometer, what are some of the other outstanding things that jumped out at you?
A number of things, Eben. One thing is that the barometer results show us, and this is research that was done in interviews with ordinary South Africans from all backgrounds across the country, and essentially what the research shows us is that we still socially a deeply divided country. We socialize at work, we socialize in the education sector and so forth, but that's forced socialization because we have to be there. But when it comes to outside of these spaces, the results show us that South Africans, by and large, still socialize within their specific groups, and these groups are mainly racial groups. So that's the one thing. The other thing that the research does show us is that South Africans are saying to us that the biggest impediment, the biggest stumbling block to reconciliation is still the deep-rooted inequality in our country. And then maybe a third thing to mention is that the social interaction between people in higher income groups is much higher than people in lower income groups, and that's understandable. If you live in a township and informal settlements, your interaction with people of a different race is very limited, and often that interaction, especially if it's in a workplace situation, is that of a master-slave relationship. And so essentially there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but the hope for me certainly is the fact that more than 70% of South Africans expressed the fact that they want to be part of a united South Africa. And in a way, one needs to look at that as well and see how do we then mobilize, how do we help the 70-odd% of South Africans of all races to realize this dream of being part of a united South Africa.
Why do we in South Africa give so much of the voice to the 20-odd% that are not interested in building this inclusive society?
If I knew the answer to that question, Eben, I probably would be a rich man. But I think there are a number of reasons. The one is that, if we say that 70-odd% want to be part of a united South Africa, that's a wish that's expressed. Yeah. That wish is not always manifested in everyday life. And so when people get into the media and they articulate these views, and my sense is that often these racist comments emanate from a position of fear. If you look at the incident at the court, my sense is that those white protesters generally were there out of fear. That's what drives them. Whereas people on the other side of the fence were there because they want to deal with this humiliation that comes from being exposed and being a victim and a target of racism. And so those overwhelming emotions are what drive people. And so even if you want to be part of United South Africa, when somebody talks about, oh, they're going to do this to us or they're going to do that to us, that fear kicks in. And I think that is why it gets so much attention. And so they are in a minority, but they articulate things in a way that stirs up fear, alternatively, that stirs up anger that stems from humiliation.
Stan, that question will make you a rich man in South Africa. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Nice, fantastic end to the first hour of our show. Stan Henkemann, I can tell you, he is the HOD of Building an Inclusive Society at the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation here in South Africa. Interesting to note, their research shows more than 70% of South Africans believe in the dream, want to make the dream happen. And that is the great hope that we have here in South Africa. Of course, there are other stories in the news. I can tell you that Cricket South Africa, well, they've confirmed that former Proteas, Dolphins, Titans and Lions cricketer Gulam Bodhi has been charged under the Anti-Corruption Code following allegations of match fixing. Now, it's a story that's got South African cricket in a bit of a spin. Lots of people are saying lots of different things. Now, on social media, here we have the Red Devil. The Red Devil who talks about Gulam Bodhi. What a letdown. He says. Then, Consider Pat talks about, but who is Gulam Bodhi though? Gulam Bodhi played for South Africa. That's who Gulam Bodhi is. That mulatto guy says news agencies need to stop calling Gulam Bodhi a former Proteas player. He played 3 matches in total against Zim and Bangladesh. That makes him a Proteas player. Tim Richards says Ghulam Bodi played 1 T20 international and got 8 of 25 balls. Was that not a warning sign? Hashtag match fixing. Shame, man. Tim Richards. Harsh, but definitely true. Well, those are the views on social media. They're coming in thick and fast. I can tell you a little bit later in our show, we'll continue the discussion around race issues and how it's reported and so forth. I see Tonya Curie is here. We'll talk to her a little bit later in the show around what's happening on social media and what are the things you shouldn't be doing on social media. But we're going to conclude this hour by taking a look at the continental weather forecast.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
When bees and wasps sting a person, they inject a bitterness venom in their skins.
We have about 3 spider species in South Africa that we have to worry about. Right. Button spiders, which include, the black widow spiders, your sac spiders, and your violent spiders.
That venom is in your system, it's in your muscle tissue. And the more your heart beats, the faster your heart beats, the faster the blood is going to circulate, and consequently it's going to get that venom into your system faster.
If you see a snake like this, the best thing to do is to just stay away from it and contact somebody that specializes in removing venomous snakes.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories. I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Babakini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin. Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and your world on SABC News.
SABC News. We report, contextualize, and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly, and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful, and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate, and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Yes, it's 10:00 hours Central African time on this Friday, the 15th of January 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News Channel 404. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour if you've just joined us. I'm Elvis Preston, and we will be with you until 1200 hours. Stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. On our question of the day, we ask you, in your view, what amounts to racism? Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom and our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. Wits University is seeking a court interdict to prevent students from protesting on campus. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has defended government's new tax legislation, which will see the state regulating the way that workers access their retirement funds. And Eskom has issued a warning to the public to be aware of a recruitment scam. Those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning.
Good morning, Elvis, and a hearty good morning to all of you at home as well. It's a big day in the world of sports today. We've also, besides the Proteas, we're actually going into day 2 of the very important and all must-win test out of the Wanderers. We also have got news of the Ram Slam T20 match fixing. I'll be chatting to Jody Hendricks about that, as well as later on I'll also be chatting to Mark Omar about the WADA report, the all long-awaited WADA report on the IAAF-sponsored doping. And more about all of that a little later in the Sports Bulletin. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned to get all the news in this hour. Now, the students, leaders who walked out of a meeting with the Higher Education Minister, Bladen Nzimande, say that they'll need to re-strategize, as yesterday's meeting did not go as they had planned. The student leaders who walked out of the meeting say they did so because the minister was not willing to make any concession or commitment on addressing their 8 demands. They demanded commitment and timelines from Minister Bladen Nzimande. They also had 8 demands, which include the scrapping of debt and registration fees. Minister Nzimande and other officials from his department met with the student leaders in Tembisa on the Gauteng East Rand yesterday. This was in an effort to find solutions to the funding of higher education. The meeting had mixed reactions as some student leaders remained inside to engage with the minister. Meanwhile, in news just in, Durban University of Technology's principal and vice-chancellor, Professor Ahmed Bawa, has resigned. The university, through a statement, says that Bawa's resignation is influenced by his personal circumstances. DUT says that the new vice-chancellor will be appointed sometime in April and June. Now, you have to stay tuned here on Newsroom for more on that story. Let's now move to the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, who has defended government's new tax legislation, which will see the state regulating the way workers access their retirement funds. The law will prevent workers from taking their pension and provident fund contributions as a cash lump sum on retirement.
From March this year, people will only be allowed to take a small portion of their total pension contribution as a cash payment. The rest will only be paid to the person in monthly installments.
Essentially, the pension provisions is about the welfare of workers as they get to retirement age. It is about encouraging savings in our economy, but also creating a culture of savings amongst our families.
The changes will not affect workers who are 55 years or older in March this year. Also, savings accumulated before March this year will not be affected by the new law. And low-income earners who have less than 247,000 rand in their pension or provident fund will not be affected. But still, public opinion is overwhelmingly against the new law.
No, I don't agree with it. They must give me all my money and I will decide for myself what I do with it.
It's totally wrong. I worked for more than 25 years. At the end of the day, when I was thinking of retiring, spending my money peacefully, then meaning that I won't be able to enjoy it.
Kosatu is fuming as well.
This money, these are the deferred wages of the workers. They have a right to decide what is it that they want to do with their money. It is very colonial in its nature and very condescending, actually.
The Labour Federation is threatening to embark on mass action to oppose the new law. Mbongini Mungchua, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, Eskom has issued a warning to the public to be aware of a recruitment scam. In a statement, the power utility says fraudsters are pretending to be recruiters for Eskom and soliciting money from job seekers in order to secure employment. Once payment is received, would-be employees are then directed to report to the Eskom building, only to find that there are no vacancies and the supposed agent has disappeared. Eskom says all employment opportunities will be advertised on its website, so you have to go through that and don't be scammed by somebody asking you for money. That is a scam in itself. And my grandmother used to say, if it sounds too good to be true, well, what do you know? It normally is. So don't take that scam seriously when they ask you for money. Let's now move on. You know that we're asking you a very important question today. We're asking you that question that relates to each and every one of us as South Africans. We're asking you, in your view, what amounts to racism? Now, on that question, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation has added its voice in condemning the latest racist comments and views on social media. This follows the inflammatory comments by the former DA member Penny Sparrow, Standard Bank economist Chris Hart, as well as the Gauteng Sports, Art, Culture and Recreation Department employee Velapi Kumalo over his racist Facebook comments. The foundation is calling on South Africans to mark Human Rights Day by creating awareness about and pledging to fight against racism. March the 21st, that is the date, and it is commemorated as Human Rights Day here in South Africa, and is also marked globally as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Now, to talk to us about the campaign here in South Africa, we are joined by Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's Director, Nishan Bolton. Mr. Bolton, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
First and foremostly, what is your reaction to the latest racial rants that we've seen on social media and how it impacts on South Africa?
The foundation is on record of having condemned it. We think that racism in all its forms is wrong. There is no place for it in South Africa today. Mm-hmm. However, we recognize that it is here, it exists, and that there's much more work that needs to be done to eliminate it.
Mm-hmm. March the 21st, a very important day for South Africa because we all try to reconcile, but why have you chosen that day to launch your campaign?
Well, firstly, this is an initiative of the Anti-Racism Network South Africa, mm-hmm. which is a broad network founded by the Mandela and Kathrada Foundations, and now involves over 60 or 70 organizations across the country, and which we hope will become much more bigger. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've done is we're basically working to a national anti-racism week that culminates on March 21st. So essentially from March 14 to 21st, we are working towards a national anti-racism week in which we would hope that we would be able to get South Africans across the country in structured discussions, debates, workshops, and activities that deal with racism, as well as visible anti-racism programs across the country in that week. Mm-hmm. It's never been done. In our 21 years of freedom, we have not paid this amount of attention to active anti-racism work. Mm-hmm. And that's why this network has proposed this idea and is championing it across the country now.
Why only now?
It's a very good question. Mm-hmm. I think as a country, we paid a lot of attention to issues of racism in its legal form, and we eradicated all of the legal issues around racism. But the institutional issues of racism, the human issues of racism, we assumed would resolve themselves. Mm-hmm. Incorrectly so. Tackling racism requires work, requires commitment, and also an understanding that it will be only dealt with over generations. It will not happen and change overnight. As much as things have changed, much of the racism we now have is very entrenched and will require long-term sustained work by as many institutions across the country, because this is not only a responsibility of government.
Now, I know it's a bit far off, but you perhaps have got a program that you can share with us from the 14th to the 21st. What will people engage with? You mentioned workshops and a number of other things.
Well, one of the big things that we want to initiate in that week is a national campaign that gets people to understand the usage of the Equality Court as an instrument that can be used to report racism and to prosecute racism. It is underutilized at the moment, but it is one of the few mechanisms that exist in the country. And in that week, we would want to be creating national awareness about the Equality Court, the Human Rights Commission and its role, as well as look at other monitoring tools that would enable us to get a sense of what are the areas of racism and how are people experiencing it across the country, and to give them a fair amount of information and education about how to deal with it. So it's not only about just talking about racism and how we experience it, but it's also what do we do about it when we experience it, where we do.
How can South Africans be part and parcel of this campaign? Because it sounds like a very noble idea.
I think that as we celebrate Mandela Day, where people basically do what they think is necessary, we're calling on all South Africans in that week to find ways of firstly understanding racism in the South African context and to begin to demonstrate their opposition to racism, whether it is in our schools, universities, places of work, places of worship, and in our homes, importantly as well. If we accomplish only one thing in that week, and it's for South Africans to talk about racism and how we deal with it, then we think we would have achieved a major objective for at least for 2016.
As the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, are you of the view that we can conquer this issue of racism in our country?
I'm hopeful, but I'm hopeful because we have, when people drew up the Freedom Charter in 1955, there was no hope and prospect at that time that we would have a democracy in 1994. But on the basis of hope and a strong vision, commitment and work, we achieved that. And likewise, I think with that same commitment and energy and work, we can tackle racism. We can eradicate it, or if not, we can reduce it to be completely insignificant in our daily lives.
So let's talk about that unification factor for everybody to get together from the 14th until the 21st. Do people sign on to a website? What do they do?
We will launch the details of this week on the 2nd of February. The Mandela and Kathrada Foundations will provide all of the details that are necessary for what can be done, where it can be done, who can be contacted. So on the 2nd of February, there will be a huge media conference to outline all of those details.
Mr. Bolton, all the best of luck with your campaign.
Very much. Thank you.
That was the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's Director, Nishan Bolton, on their campaign against racism. It's taking place from the 14th to the 21st of March, and you have to be, as a South African, be part of that particular conference and workshops and a lot of things that they are planning. 2nd of February, he says, that is the date that we got to look out for when they launch the campaign. So be aware of that, and we'll also pay attention to it here on your favorite channel of choice, Channel 404. But Eben is standing by with some very interesting stats around social media and how it played a large a part in terms of this racial slurs that we saw on social media and the stats and the trends that emanated from that. It's over to you, Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Travis. Of course, don't forget the question we're asking you. It's a difficult question. We're coming to terms with it here in South Africa. We want to know, what do you view as racism? Or what amounts to racism in your view, if we can say? That's our question today. I know it's tough subject matter for a Friday, but we want to start the year on the right footing and come to terms with issues of social cohesion, issues of racism, reconciliation should be uppermost in our minds. Our social media plays an important role in how we communicate today. Everyone now has an opinion, and they believe it matters. And they use these platforms to express their emotions quite often. But it also becomes a place where bigotry and racism spreads, as well as culprits expose themselves there, like we've seen in the recent past. Now, I'm well, in studio, joined today by the darling of the media world right now, Roy Africa's social media director, or the director of the business, Tonya Kuri. Hello, Tonya. Always nice to have you with us.
Good morning, Evan, and thank you for that enormous introduction.
Well, you guys have done such fantastic work in the last couple of years with regards to decoding social media, I think, for us in the mainstream media. Interesting for me would be your take on what's been happening in the recent past year in South Africa, and then how it's sort of gone from there on social media.
Well, it's fascinating that, and it's tragic that we've started the year like this.
Yeah.
You know, like I was expecting lots of Happy New Years and holiday pics and that sort of thing when we opened our social networks this year and also our news media, but it's absolutely contrary to that. We saw the start with Penny Sparrow, with the hashtag Penny Sparrow, and from there it just sort of snowballed. The next thing we had all sorts of other hashtags appearing, Justin Van Vieren, Chris Hart, Gareth Cliff, all that sort of thing started submerging, and it certainly has dominated both the news and social media charts in South Africa over the past 31 days.
Social media gives us the thing that we've always all wanted, a platform where we can express ourselves, that freedom of expression that I think everyone craves, but it comes with dangers. Where should one see the line as?
I always draw this analogy. When you post on any social network, imagine you are taking out a billboard, putting it on the busiest highway in South Africa, putting your face to it, your cell phone number and your address and your comment. Then multiply that by all the busy highways in the world. That's what you're doing when you're using a social network. And I don't know where this misnomer comes from. When you sit behind a smart device, you've somehow protected and you're in your own little bubble. Absolutely not. In fact, it's completely the reverse. And that's what we've seen happen here.
There's also a ripple effect that social media has. Talk us through this ripple effect and how things can kind of spiral out of control so quickly.
I think what we've seen specifically over the past couple of weeks is that companies, businesses and brand reputation has come to the forefront with these hashtags. So we've seen Jawat's Properties distancing themselves from Penny Sparrow. We've also seen Standard Bank taking strong action. We've seen Idle South Africa taking strong action as well. So we've seen all the brands now coming into focus and by association, and some of them are not even linked whatsoever to the commentary that's been made. In fact, most of them. So the ripple effect is that it can damage your company even though you're not even involved.
Yeah.
You know. So and from a Media Monitor's perspective, that makes very interesting conversation.
We've got a chart up here. I think you know this chart quite well, Tonya, but just sort of talk us through this a little bit. This is now the recent part, which one's caught the most attention, damage and so forth. Which one do you want to look at specifically?
So on the left-hand side, you're looking at the news media, and on the right-hand side, you're looking at the social media. You know, we do both, Evan.
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side, you'll see I've taken the big hashtags that have been making the rounds about racism and put them together, and you'll see that Penny Sparrow and Gareth Cliff make quite a big impact in news media. But when we switch that chart to social media on the right, you'll see that there is only one social media conversation that dominates over that time, and that is Gareth Cliff. And I think that's because he is such a big social media personality, and because he also wrote, he had a really big right to reply, and he exercised it, etc.
He lives in the social media space.
That's his world, right?
Yeah.
That's his world. So we see that Gareth dominates by a huge amount, 2/3 majority, against all the other related hashtags. And then what we've done as well is compared it to how it compares to other news in our country. Like, we've had really big news in our country. We've had the matric results, we've had back to school, we've had our Happy New Years, and all of them are dwarfed by this social media activity we're talking about with racism.
Is this the future of media? Is this what we're seeing? Is this where the world is heading? Is that we're going to increasingly see social media taking up that space?
I think what is fascinating to watch is how social media is dominating news. Before, it always used to be we talk about what news is puts out there. Now we as social media consumers are the people that are making news, and that's what we're seeing. And that dynamic is growing every single second of every day.
The responsibility of the platforms themselves to moderate bigotry, racism and that kind of thing, do they have a responsibility to do that now?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and it's a grey area. You know, I think what is definitely clear is that brands need to implement social media strategies and social media policies that address this type of thing. But you are still your own person, Eben, and you're entitled to do whatever you like in your own free time.
Yeah.
But attaching yourself to a certain brand, that's when brand damage happens.
Yeah, we see close-up views at what you are talking about in this space. Of course, the Gareth Cliff, really with Cliff Central and the like, really lives in that space. In conclusion, do you think we're going to start seeing people being banned off platforms and so forth going forward, or will that never be necessary?
I don't think it's possible. You know, I saw something last night about some fake profiles that have been put up about somebody who doesn't even exist and spurting these racist comments, and the person it's not a real person. So it's not possible to control that space in that way. I think we as social media consumers should act responsibly. But how that's managed, who knows?
Well, Tonya, fantastic. Nice to have you back with us at the beginning of the year. Tonya has just agreed she's going to come. She's going to come back every Friday to give us a little look in as to what has happened in the world of social media. It's such a vibrant place. Things change all the time. It'll be nice to have you with us every Friday, Tonya, to decode what happens in social media and to give us your tip as to what not to do. One thing you should never do is have your phone in your hand after a couple of drinks and start tweeting. That is what Tonya says. The first thing you should avoid is tweeting while under the influence of alcohol. Anyhow, we're going to take a short break. We come back with some heavyweight sports news today with Kendall Mahamate. Don't go away.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned.
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened.
I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't. Who are you asking? You're looking at me?
Yes, Zubaida, I'm talking to you.
So the old fuddy-duddies like Dennis and me will remain there?
I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about... Damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
So much more than just the Legal and Rights Show. Join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Good morning, welcome back. As Evan just said, we've got heavyweight sports news today. And the first story that we top it off with is the former head of World Athletics, Lamine Diack of Senegal, who stepped down last year after 16 years of leading the IAAF, is being fingered as the man behind the cover-up of organized doping and blackmailing of athletes. Independent investigator Dick Pound is slamming governance at the International Association of Athletics Federation, but says the new president of the IAAF, Sebastian Coe, is the right man to bring the change.
Pound's reports for the Independence Commission of the World Anti-Doping Agency added to a rapidly growing scandal involving organized doping. The former head of WADA released the first reports in November, which led to athletics superpower Russia being banned from competitions for state-sponsored doping. The latest report says among the failures of governance at IAAF were the employment of Diack's two sons as consultants.
The information the IC has very clearly indicates that the disruption of the Federation emanated from the very top, the president, Lamine Diack. He inserted his personal legal advisor, Habib Cissé, into the IAAF Medical and Anti-Doping Department in November of 2011, with the London 2012 and the Moscow 2013 championships looming up.
The Commission does not share the views expressed to the effect that the IAAF was inadequate in its responses to blood doping in the period under review.
Sebastian Coe has denied suggestions that he tried to influence Diak. Pound eased some of the pressure on Coe.
I can't, if we're descending to personalities, I can't think of anyone better than Lord Coe to lead that. So all our fingers are crossed in that respect.
Russia, which now has no accredited doping laboratory and faces the prospect of its athletes missing the Rio Olympics in 6 months' time, has come out in support of the outcomes of Pound's investigation. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
And so that long-awaited second report by World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, was released yesterday, where the first report focused on state-sponsored doping in Russia, which led to its indefinite suspension from all things athletics. The second one focused almost entirely on the former head of international athletics, Lamine Diak. He now stands accused of organized conspiracy and corruption, at the heart of the IAAF, while his second in charge, Sebastian Coe, and current head of the IAAF, was exonerated by the report. Now, to talk more about all of this and try and unveil the truths behind the truths is Mark Oma.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm very disappointed with the report. I think that the first report and the second report should have been combined. Remember, we were told they are going to wow us. They're going to come up with, we expected them to tell us what's going on in different countries.
I've been waiting for this report for 2 months now.
To me, what is clear was that there were only two objectives of this whole process: to destroy the legacy of Lamine Diak, to destroy the legacy and positive contribution of his son, Papa Masete Diak, in sports marketing, and to attack Russia. The easiest matter to deal with is, first of all, Papa Diak. About a month ago...
Hold on. That's a big accusation, because this is a big report that we've all been waiting for.
Exactly.
Why do you say that?
We had expected, the anticipation was, tell us which countries we have seen doping violations. And then from there you say, all right, these were the questions asked, these were the answers given. And then you draw inferences that are supported by valid premises. We've not seen that. It's just a report like Mark and Kendo go and sit under a tree, write whatever we want, and come and present it. This has been a thumbsuck. The vice president of WADA is Mankenkesi Stofile. Please call him here and tell us what's going on, because this report is a total disappointment. We expected to hear earth-shaking news, and we were told we are going to wow you.
Well, with that said, it's very interesting, because, yes, we were expecting to hear about the likes of Kenya, for example.
Exactly.
How bad is the doping there? However, Dick Pound did say that was out of the ambit of this particular report, that he was only asked to focus on the IAAF and Russia.
Well, let me also tell you, Dick Pound has said Sebastian Coe is the right man to lead. He already has failed. Sobokova, the Russian, who failed a doping test, has been banned. When we were last year, we said that a British athlete failed a doping test. Since then, Paula Radcliffe has come, shed tears on TV and said, yes, it was me. What happened? She wasn't banned. She shed crocodile tears and then was rewarded by being appointed by the Sebastian Coe administration as a member of the Athletes Commission, somebody who failed doping tests. So you have one standard for the rest of the world. You make a mistake, you're punished. But if you're British, you don't. That shows you that that was a wrong call in terms of what message do you send out? And I think this is where... So, again, Dick Pound has made a mistake there.
I mean, look, Dick Pound was actually even questioned post the press conference about why it is that he thought Sebastian Coe would be the right man to bring in change at the IAAF. He was actually asked pointedly, did Sebastian Coe lie? And the reason was because he had implicated the council, a very compliant council that turned a blind eye to what the mastermind, Lamine Diak, had been busy with. Sebastian Coe has been busy with that council since 2007. He's been a VP. Where was he all the time? How does that feature in all of this that we're talking about?
In fact, you can ask yourself, did Lamine Diak hold a gun to the head of everybody in the council and say, keep quiet? So there are very serious questions. Dick Pound has left... This report has left more questions than answered. And I think that this is where we are going. As an African, what I would have thought is, listen, this, for example, when you have issues that have a global reach that touch Africa, we must also ask, what as Africans should we think? I look at the role that Lamin Diak has played. For over 40 years, he has given his life to athletics. What athletics was at the beginning of the 1970s and what it is today is different. These were the people who put pressure and said, one country, one vote. Because what happened at that time, you had Lord Burghley, who was head of the IAAF between 1946 and 1976, 30 years. You had what looked like a Security Council. A few European countries had too much power, and the rest were passengers, natives of Africa, Asia, and etc., etc. What has happened during this era is that athletics has been taken to all corners of the world. And we need to celebrate these positive developments. I'm not saying that we don't have doping cases. The other thing about both Lamin Diak and even Papa Diak is that if there are accusations, you tell us, these were the questions we put to them, these were the answers we did. So far, nothing like that has happened. All we have been told is that French prosecutors leaked a report, so we must deal with leakages. We are not being given the actual thing. What question was put to Lamin Diak? What was his answer?
So the big question then is where to now? Because the allegations have been made. Athletics is in turmoil. We've got the Olympics coming up. Russia seems like it's not going to be at the Olympics this year, at least not as a nation of athletes, not as a federation. What happens now? How do we go forward? I mean, Sebastian Coe at the head of all the reforms and changes, is that not a case of sweeping on the same broom?
I think, first of all, as I've given the example of Paula Radcliffe, people should step back and say, I don't think Sebastian Coe is good at making ethical judgments. You see, the Russian case, there is hope because they have already had an interaction between the IAAF on this transformation process. They are electing a new committee this weekend and then continuing with that process. So I'm optimistic that the Russians will be there, also because the head of the IOC had a meeting with the head of the Russian Olympic Committee, and they said, no, innocent people should not be punished. So there's a hope. There's a hope that Russia will be there. They may not make it for the World Indoor Championships in March, but at the Olympics, I think they will be there. We want to be hopeful. But as for where we now need to do things, we've heard a lot from Dick Pound and the others, but we've not heard from Lamin Diak. What do you say? I mean, in this report, they even throw in the name of Vladimir Putin, the head of state of Russia. It's far-fetched to try and suggest that Vladimir Putin was also part of the doping process.
You have mentioned once there was a bit of geopolitics doing the rounds around about this case, a whiff of that in those corridors?
Exactly. I think that is very central to it. But you see, when you have such very profound allegations, you must bring the person and say, Lamin Diak, this is what was said. What is your answer? And then you give people that. Because IAAF is not a private members club. It's not a secretive organization. It's a public entity. And here is a person's whole achievement. We want him to say, this is my answer. Here is the question, this is my answer. And then from that, we derive logical conclusion. That is the logical form of scientific argument. That has not been done. And I think that's the shortfall. I think, and if you notice, when you look at the responses of the IAAF on their website, they are very cautious when they are giving the report. It's the media that rush with people's name. And that could be being cautious because of the potential for litigation. So I'm waiting to hear, because remember Papa Masete Diak about a month ago said, listen, I'm waiting for the investigators. I'm ready to answer any question. And that suggests that Papa Masete Diak was never interviewed before they said these things. So we are still at 2011 where these allegations were made.
Wow, fantastic. Very interesting, and definitely something to stay atop of, yes. Because we still have to hear about what's going on in Kenya and the rest of the world, because Dick Pound did say that it's not just the Russians, there are others who dope, and we know that a lot of Kenyans have been sanctioned over the last couple of years. I want to thank you so much for coming through. Yes. We will pick up this conversation at a later date.
All the best.
All right, thank you. That's Mark Omar, sports journalist, giving us the where-tos and where-fors on the second Wada report on IAAF and doping. Now, moving on to other sports news. Absa Premiership title-chasing Mamelodi Sundowns are wary of relegation-threatened neighbours, the University of Pretoria, tomorrow night. The two Pretoria clubs find themselves on opposite sides of the log, with Sundowns lying second on the table and Ducks perched second from the bottom.
They clash tomorrow evening.
Sundown's stay at the top of the log was short-lived. They went into the Christmas break with a slender lead, but lost some ground after drawing with ABSA Premiership defending champions Kaizer Chiefs last weekend. Their next mission is to collect maximum points against Tuks on Saturday, which is easier said than done.
Wherever Tuks is, where the players are, they're looking up, looking forward for this game. So that's the principle first, and they are always giving us a problem. They're not easy customers. Look at the history. We really don't beat them easily and convincingly.
Trailing current log leaders Bidvest with just 2 points, the Brazilians will aspire for consistency to remain within touching distance.
We are aware what's happening at the top. You know, there's ACs, there's Vets, there's even Chiefs. There's a lot of teams that are coming up good. But for us, we just have to remain humble. We have to approach each game as it comes.
With more than half the games still left this season, anything is possible.
They need points. Same as us. They really need to turn things around. So it's going to be a big one for us.
The University of Pretoria have collected a mere 9 points from 13 matches with just 2 wins under their belt this season. Sfeso Ramara, SABC News, Midrand.
Right, now cricket South Africa has confirmed that former Proteas, Dolphins, Titans and Lions cricketer Gulam Bodi is the intermediary who's been charged under its anti-corruption code. The charges of match fixing relate to last year's Ram Slam T20 Series Challenge. Now, Bodi has been provisionally suspended from having anything to do with cricket, national or internationally. He's now no longer playing, having made his last appearance for the Lions a year ago. He also represented South Africa in 2 ODIs against Zimbabwe in 2007 and in a single T20 against the West Indies in that same year. But he's been a prolific batsman at provincial level. Joining me now to talk about this massive story in cricket and match fixing in our domestic cricket, Jody Hendricks.
Kendall, a sad day indeed. We all know the Hansi Cronje saga in 2000 that rocked not only South African cricket and world cricket. And it's indeed sad to see that we all thought that this was a national or international problem, but now our provincial cricket affected as well. And a respected player like Gulam Bodi, who's, he's been around the block for the last 15 years playing provincial cricket. A sad day indeed. And I think, we need to give credit to Cricket South Africa for the way they've handled it and the anti-corruption unit to address this issue.
I believe that the ICC is also quite deeply involved with the investigation itself.
Well, we all know that internationally, match fixing has been around since the early 90s. The first rumours we heard about it was Shane Warne and Mark Hoare, the Australians being approached. We all know what happened with Hansi Cronje, rumours of it being rife in England. So I think the ICC would take a keen interest in this. But like I said, just sad that even our provincial game or our local game now being affected and not only the national teams, as we initially thought that was the core of the problem was.
Of course, obviously, in any corrupt relationship, there's a relationship. There is someone else on the other side of that corrupt relationship or a group of people. Yeah. Who else has been implicated?
Well, as you said, that Bodia apparently is an intermediary, kind of a middleman. And from what I hear, it was international bookmakers, either from England or India, who approached him to get insight into the local game. And it wasn't necessarily to get a result out of a specific game. It was more to do with spot fixing, as they call it, and that it would be like, for example, to say in the 10th over, bowl 2 bad overs. If you're a batsman, run slowly at this rate. So that's what the main implication is, not necessarily to get a result out of the game.
And that's exactly how diverse betting in sport has become, isn't it? I mean, doesn't this make us question some of the results we saw in last year's Ram Slam T20, the 5-4 that Harris Viljoen got, for example, which is basically on the back of that, is now on the side playing at the Wanderers. Quinton de Kock, those fantastic centuries, JP Duminy, and so on. Doesn't that question some of those results?
It does. Like I said, there's always been a question mark on my radio show last night. I asked this specific question, and the one listener said that ever since Hansi Cronje has been convicted, he's never taken cricket seriously. And this is yet another blow, because you don't know if the player performed at his best, or if it was match fixing or spot fixing, as they've said it. And also, interestingly, they said the amount of money being poured into this, it would be easily, we all know that cricketers earn a lot of money, but if somebody comes and these guys deal in dollars, so we're not talking rands here, Kendall. In one
talking
game,
in the millions.
In one game in 2009 in India, international game, more than $15 million was made by bookmakers. So that gives you an idea of how easily it would be for a cricketer, a provincial cricketer who doesn't earn maybe what his international colleagues are earning, to be tempted to get involved in something like this.
Just now, before we started speaking, you heard me speaking to Mark Oma about the corruption going on within the world of athletics. We all know about the corruption that's been going on within the world of international football. And now we're talking cricket. What do you think is happening to the integrity of sport?
I think it's taken a big blow. I think wherever there's money involved, people will be tempted to get involved somewhere illegally. And with cricket, it was quite easily. We all know what happened with Hansi. A guy approached him in a restaurant and said, here's money for you if you do this and this, or let's just meet and we'll give you some $10,000. So I think the relationship where there's big money involved, and sports is a business. Never forget that, people are making big money out of sport, and there are people sitting back and thinking, well, if they can make money, I'm sure I can also make a bit of money.
All right, now, with that said, where do we go to now? Because the big thing really is we obviously need to come to a resolution, and a positive resolution for the future of the sport, for youngsters that want to play the sport and so on.
Yeah, well, first of all, the initial reports that Bodie was not willing to cooperate with Cricket South Africa's anti-corruption unit. He has now given the fact that he'll start working with them to get to the root of this problem, because it is a real problem. I think Cricket South Africa and the ICC, to a certain extent, will have to address this issue. They made an example by banning Hansi Cronje for life. We've seen he's been banned provisionally. I think jail time would probably be the next step to show us that they are serious about addressing this problem, because if you find a guy, he's 37 years old, Kendall, his playing career is basically over. He hasn't played in more than a year. But I think an example needs to be made. If it's Gulam Bodie, it would be sad for South African cricket, but also for internationally to be seen to be taking this problem seriously.
Right. Okay, now we've got a test currently on the go right now at the Wanderers, just around the corner from us. The Proteas are currently playing. We've got live pictures that are available to our viewers. Can you tell me quickly, what do you think? In fact, there we are. We're going through a replay of one of the shots, and I'm hoping that it's not a review. What do you think about the Proteas and how they're going?
Well, I think the team selection for me, that's the big headache at the moment. Obviously losing Quinton de Kock at the 11th hour yesterday and having to fly Dane Willis in from Port Elizabeth. When they had somebody like JP Duminy who could bat at number 7, didn't make sense for me. But I think it was all square on day one, 267 for 7. I think England would be happy with the 7 wickets. I think South Africa could have probably scored about 50 runs more. But also our batsmen got in, but they never quite stuck around. I think Dean Elgar made 46, Amla 40, AB de Villiers 37. Nobody went on and played that big innings that we needed.
All right, yeah, now we do hope that we get something going between these two that have been at the crease for a little bit now, and that we keep batting at least until lunchtime. You know what, Jody, thanks very much for chatting with us. We're going to take some live commentary from our presenters that are out at the Wanderers right now and see if they can give us and our viewers a wrap of what's going on.
Thank you.
That's another fantastic nut by Jimmy Anderson. 281 for 7 as we welcome our news channel 404, SABC. This partnership now between Kagiso Rabada and Chris Morris has gone over 50 runs, 56 runs, and still going strong. 281 for 7, the pass score perhaps 316. Might go over that, threatening at the moment, but it's been a frustrating morning thus far for Alistair Cook. Edge is found. A lot of South African batters, they were in and didn't capitalise on the scores they had. Dean Elgar being the top scorer with his 46, but no one really cashed in and carry on.
Yeah, a lot of starts made yesterday by South Africa and the batsmen. No one really pushing on. But 1 or 2 loose shots, and cost them dearly in the end. And just felt that I understand Dean Elgar worked really hard for his 46, and then was almost a little bit tentative on the shot that he played. But he did the hard yards, and AB de Villiers tried to come in and, you know, up the ante.
So there were a lot of loose strokes as well, which sort of gave England soft wickets yesterday.
Yeah, there was a few strange dismissals. You know, the run-out, I think, was also unnecessary. But, yeah, that's what happens. And, I keep harping on the subject about, you know, scoring at more than 3 runs and over. I understand yesterday there was a bit of seam and, you know, a bit of swing. But I still feel that, you know, that some of the dismissals was a bit soft. And if they didn't have so many wickets down today, you know, they could have pushed on, you know, 3 and maybe 5 down or 4 down even yesterday. It would have been a totally different scenario today. But beat it as you may, I think there were 1 or 2 fantastic balls that got some of the Proteas batsmen out yesterday. And yeah, Rabada and Morris are doing a fantastic job just frustrating them. But it's good to see them still being positive. You know, there's no reason why they can't be positive, especially today. And today and tomorrow will be fantastic batting conditions.
Yes, South Africa fighting hard there at the Wanderers. Thanks to Kendall Makamate for doing an extended high-quality sports slot this morning. Of course, now we shift our focus. President Jacob Zuma is to lead a South African delegation of cabinet ministers and business leaders to the World Economic Forum in Davos, close to Switzerland, next week. Let's go straight to the presidential guest house for the address.
Because I'm going somewhere. This breakfast, we organized because we believe it is important that when we go to Davos, we call ourselves the Team South Africa. Team South Africa should be having all the issues, common issues, and also have to know what are the issues that we need to raise there, both in the area of challenges as well as in the area of what we are doing to address those challenges as a country. Because the important thing when we are there, which we do not forget, is that we are, in a sense, putting across South Africa as a destination for investment. And if that is the case, we need therefore to articulate what are the challenges and also what are we doing and how are we going to receive the investors. But also, we don't forget that we are in the African continent. How do we project Africa? At times in Davos, not always, there are sessions that deal with the region Africa. And so from South Africa in particular, because South Africa is regarded as a leading economy in the continent, we ought to know what to say and how do we make people feel it is good to go to South Africa. We believe there is a lot that we are doing as a country, a lot of progress that we are making, but at the same time, there are challenges. We do have ways of dealing with challenges. For an example, we have the National Development Plan. So as a country, we know what we are doing and what we need to do. We have a vision, 2030, and how do we present that as a country? How do we make people feel this country knows what it is doing? We crafted the plan, and those that are crafting how do we implement our plans right now, who are looking at a number of things. And these are developments that are not very common in other countries, wherein there is a participation of South Africans who have the talent and expertise to help look at how do we implement our plan. We have got investments that we have made, the infrastructure, which is absolutely crucial for any economy to grow, as an issue of energy. What are we doing? Because energy is a critical thing for economic development. So these are matters that we'll be dealing with. After the minister's presentation this morning, We are now in separate groups where people are saying, what are the three main things that we might present all of us from business and government? And they will be reporting back to the plenary here, and I'm sure thereafter you will hear how they have gone and how they've concluded on these matters. Mine was just to say what we're doing. And I'm happy that you are here, and I'm sure you should be part of Team South Africa to present South Africa as an investment destination. Not so? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
That was President Jacob Zuma there giving us the views of what they're doing as they're meeting with business and government. He is now taking leave, but the ministers and the business people are still busy at work. They've grouped themselves into commissions where they are able to discuss and deliberate on the challenges and the solution the country is looking for. It's back to the studio.
More tragedy for Nepal. A 7.3 earthquake struck the Asian country this morning.
Frightened evacuees fled camps and health facilities when the quake struck.
I think it's a really big hit of earthquake because the gate has also slanted and every pole are moving like that they will fall again.
And it comes barely 2 weeks after a 7.8 magnitude quake claimed over 8,000 lives.
The country saw more of its historic buildings and temples destroyed. The country's president Ram Baran Yadav was addressing a meeting when the quake hit.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. CAT.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom now. Of course, today we're dealing with racism. And let's take a quick look at our question of the day, some of the answers that you guys... Ravonia Naidu says, at SABC Newsroom, ignorance of our country's culture and history and the inability to think objectively. We need honest talk with a plan to move forward. Yes, more than 70%. Asa Fontaine talks about SABC Newsroom. Genocide is the most extreme form of racism. Where you're so racist that you want to wipe out a group. Racism must fall, says Asa Fontaine. That one from Stembele Ndumdum says, behavior, attitude, performance have no race. It's a personality. Racism must fall. That's the hashtag. They're talking directly, of course, to us Now, I can tell you that South Africa is not the only country that has racism issues. We've heard about the fatal incidents in the United States, continuing conflict, Palestine and Israel, as well as several ethnic tensions across the African continent, such as Burundi and even Kenya. Now, joining us via Skype is our East African correspondent, Sarah Kamani. Very good morning to you, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. A very good morning from Nairobi.
Sarah, the sound is a little bit dodgy, but we're going to go ahead. There have been recent reports about ethnic tensions there. Just tell us about the kind of tensions and the kind of divisions that you have in Kenya.
Well, what happens in Kenya and what is happening now, there is a border dispute between two communities, somewhere between the border of Rift Valley and Western Kenya. These are the usual things that...
Unfortunately. Sorry, Sarah. The sound quality is just unacceptable. Can't hear a word that she's saying. Unfortunately, we would have loved to hear, because, very often we are caught in our own worlds here in South Africa. and we don't often have that window to the rest of the continent. Our question of the day, in your view, what amounts to racism? We've seen the comments coming in so far. Keep it coming. A little bit later, we'll take a look at some of the other ones that have come in. We'd love to hear from you here at SABC Newsroom. Time for us now to take a break. Elvis President will be back at the top of the hour with a complete update. We're going to look at Wits University. There'll be issues around that. Also, a press conference on the World Economic Forum. Hopefully, we'll bring that to you in the next hour. But let's take a break.
In Africa, technology has created many new ways of doing things.
ICT is an increasingly important part of everybody's life.
It's being used in education, for social media, and now for farming too.
The best thing about internet for a farmer is that you get to share information.
On Network, we give you all the important African technology and social media news. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
SABC News, we report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Friday, the 15th of January 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston, and we will be with you until 1200 hours. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent, and we're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. In our question of the day, we're asking you today, you've seen it on your screen just now, in your view, what amounts to racism? And that's the theme that we've been carrying through the whole morning today. So let us know on our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom and on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. Wits University is seeking a court interdict to prevent students from protesting on campus. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has defended government's new tax legislation, which will see the state regulating the way workers access their retirement funds. And Eskom has issued a warning to the public to be aware of a recruitment scam. Now, those are all your headlines, but first, before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Hearty good morning. It's been a very busy morning. What with the Proteas trying to get themselves over the line and all that. But let me also greet our viewers at home. Good morning. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. As I just said, the Proteas have all to do on day 2 of the third test against England. A little while ago, they won 284 for 9. They're trying to just hold on to get to 300 plus.
So I think that's the right way to go in South Africa. Their bowlers, they must take note of this. Get the ball up.
And at the same time, as you know, that overshadowing the cricket on the pitch yesterday was the breaking news that former Protea Ghulam Bodhi, the figure at the center of the Ram Slam T20 match fixing scandal. We go deep into that story, which we did early on with Jody Hendricks. And then, of course, we spoke to Mark Omar about what's happening with the IAAF, with that second water report being released on organized doping in the IAAF. So more about all of that a little later in the Sports Bulletin. Back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up later, so you have to stay tuned. Our top story this hour. In news just in, the Durban University of Technology's Principal and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ahmed Bawa, has resigned. The university, through a statement, says that Bawa's resignation is influenced by his personal circumstances. DUT says that the new Vice-Chancellor will be appointed sometime in April and June. Now, you have to stay tuned for more details as it unfolds right here on Newsroom and all our sister programs that's coming up a little bit later. Meanwhile, Wits University is going to the High Court in Johannesburg to seek a court interdict stopping students from protesting on campus. The court order would follow a previous one that was granted to Wits in December. As you can recall, it would allow for police presence on the campus along with private security already contracted by Wits. Meanwhile, the students' leaders who walked out of a meeting with the Higher Education Minister, Bladen Zamande, says they'll need to re-strategize as yesterday's meeting did not go accordingly as to what they had hoped for. The student leaders who walked out of the meeting say they did so because the minister was not willing to make any concessions or commitments on addressing their 8 demands. They demanded commitment and timelines from the minister. They also had 8 demands, which include the scrapping of debt and registration fees. Minister Nzimande and other officials from his department met with the student leaders in Tembisa on the Gauteng East Rand yesterday. This was in an effort to find solutions to the funding of higher education. The meeting had mixed reactions as some student leaders remained inside to engage with the minister. A Limpopo police officer has died after a prisoner that he was transporting to Pretoria allegedly strangled him. Gauteng police spokesperson Busapi Ngumalo says that the prisoner, who was handcuffed, was in the passenger's back seat of the vehicle. He allegedly grabbed the back of the officer's neck and then choked him. The officer lost control of the vehicle shortly after the stormfall off-ramp and crashed into a wall. He died on impact. The prisoner was critically injured during the crash and is currently in hospital under police guard. He will face a charge of murder among the other criminal charges that he's already facing. Now, for more on this, we are joined on the line by the Gauteng police spokesperson, Busapi Ngumalo. Busapi, very good morning to you and welcome. Can you confirm that a police officer was strangled by a prisoner and then died in Limpopo?
Yes, the incident happened on the N1 just after the stormfall of Rem. Our officers were working there and one motorist witnessed the vehicle that was moving from one lane to another as if someone, by people inside the vehicle are fighting up until the vehicle lost control. That's when they established that there was there's a warrant officer from Limpopo and a suspect that was transported to Pretoria court.
Now, when did this happen? Was it this morning and exactly where? You said it did happen at Stormfall off-ramp.
It happened on the N1 just after Stormfall off-ramp, toll gate of Stormfall, and it happened yesterday just before 12.
All right. Unfortunately, that's where we got to leave it there. That was the Gauteng Traffic Police spokesperson, Busapi Ngumalo. Let's now go to the Finance Minister, who is about to address the media on the issues pertaining to Davos as well as retirement funds, we believe. Let's cross there live.
Message, which will hopefully create more optimism in our economy.
In view of our current economic status, I'm hopeful that we'll be having the guts to say what really needs to be done to fix our economy.
Yes, no, I think we are quite clear. And, you know, the one thing about South Africa is that we're very open about our problems. We know we have an electricity problem. We know we have a poverty and unemployment and inequality problem. The world knows that. The question is whether we can work as Team South Africa, as one team, to ensure that we have a common agenda, a common program, and each one does whatever they can in order to move us in the right direction. And I'm hoping that we will reinforce the team spirit and do whatever we can in each of the sectors to contribute to this.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So if you could just stay with social media. It's going.
Now, President Jacob Zuma is, of course, he's leading the South African delegation of cabinet ministers and business leaders to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Klosters, and Switzerland next week. Now, the World Economic Forum's annual meeting brings together the world leaders from business, government, international organizations, academia, and civil society in Davos to discuss the global economy. Minister of Finance, which you just heard there, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, who is the lead minister for the WEF, accompanied by other ministers, are holding a briefing session today with the Team South Africa business delegation to prepare for the WEF annual meeting. Now, we wanted to get hold of our reporter there, but it seems that's not going to happen right now. As soon as we can establish the link, we will do so. Meanwhile, the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, has defended government's new tax legislation, which will see the state regulating the way that workers access their retirement funds. The law will prevent workers from taking their pension and provident fund contributions as a cash lump sum on retirement.
From March this year, people will only be allowed to take a small portion of their total pension contribution as a cash payment. The rest will only be paid to the person in monthly installments.
Essentially, the pension provisions is about the welfare of workers as they get to retirement age. It is about encouraging savings in our economy, but also creating a culture of savings amongst our families.
The changes will not affect workers who are 55 years or older in March this year. Also, savings accumulated before March this year will not be affected by the new law. And low-income earners who have less than 247,000 rand in their pension or provident fund will not be affected. But still, public opinion is overwhelmingly against the new law.
No, I don't agree with it. They must give me all my money and I will decide for myself what I do with it.
It's totally wrong. I worked for more than 25 years. At the end of the day, when I was thinking of retiring, spending my money peacefully, then meaning that I won't be able to enjoy it.
Kosatu is fuming as well.
This money, these are the deferred wages of the workers. They have a right to decide what is it that they want to do with their money. It is very colonial in its nature and very condescending, actually.
The Labour Federation is threatening to embark on mass action to oppose the new law. Mbongeni Mutwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, we're asking you a very important question today, and you can let us know what's on your mind on our Facebook page as well as on our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. We're asking you the question, in your view, what amounts to racism? Now, that's in relation to the entire theme that we've carried the entire morning. Race relations in South Africa remain a key challenge, it seems like it. If we can just move on from there, if we can take our stance that this remains a key challenge, especially in light of what is happening currently in South Africa with the social media rants that we've seen in the recent social media storm. Renowned economist Chris Hart has been at the center of a social media storm. The Progressive Professionals Forum has added its voice of discontent, accusing the media of double standards. Recently, the PPF's president, Mr. Jimmy Manye, wrote that the country's media is diligent in investigating fake qualifications when those involved are black, whereas white people with similar fraudulent qualifications are not investigated. Mwanyele Jimmy Manye is the president of the Progressive Professionals Forum, and he now joins us in studio to discuss this. Mr. Manye, very good morning and welcome.
Hi, Chief. No, I think rebranding is an exercise.
Yes.
Zwanele is the name.
Zwanele, not Mwanyele, like they had it on our script.
No, right? I've got it right, but pronunciation is Mzwanele.
Mzwanele.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. Why do you say that the media is full of double standards in terms of what you wrote earlier?
Yeah, no, look, I think media would probably even confess that when it's black people, they're very enthusiastic in pointing out all the misdemeanors, as it were. But when it's white people, they just shy away. I mean, the whole issue of trying to even verify Chris Hart's qualifications, as it were, was a serious, hapless exercise by media. And yet, when it's black people, the very next day, they will even tell you what causes. They will even give you the lecturer. They will even give you, everything that is there. But when it gets to whites, they just disappear. And instead, we had other media people reinforcing, even using wrong information that no, this person is as qualified and so on, and which is not true. I mean, an example is it Alec Hawke, who came and supported and said, no, this man actually has got a BSc degree, which he doesn't have. Indeed, Alec later corrected that, but he did say that the guy's got BSc when he doesn't have. So media, when it comes to white people, is almost like they have a duty to protect. Yes. When it comes to black people, they've got a duty to destroy.
Why do you think is that the case, though?
Is it
historical?
It probably talks to a much deeper issue of what is racism. It talks to a much deeper issue of the ownership structure in this country. Media in South Africa is by and large owned by white people generally. So if you understand what is racism, which in my definition and that of the Oxford Dictionary, talks to the issue of racial superiority. It talks to using race as a point of departure, that because you are this race, you are superior to others. So that is the fundamental thing. So when you have an economy that is looking like what South Africa looks like, where black people are on the fringes, of the economy, and they're not allowed. And the reason they're not allowed is because they're not trusted. They are not thought of as equal. They're not thought of as equally competent. Then you have a problem. You know, when corporate South Africa has plucked up enough courage to put black people even as CEOs, they just have a duty to put in a white babysitter at the same time. I mean, the issue at hand is a Standard Bank. Why is it that a well-qualified guy like Sim Shabalala is not running Standard Bank alone? You know, the racism in Standard Bank disallows them from doing the right thing. Sim is ready, capable of running Standard Bank on his own, but the system of racism doesn't trust him. Now, if you have media that continues to play into this thing and rubbish black people, it actually further entrenches racism in this country. So I blame media for its biasness against black people.
Would you then also suggest that you would blame social media for the racial spats that we've seen in South Africa currently that is happening? We've seen Chris Hart. You mentioned Chris Hart. We've also seen Penny Sparrow. We've also seen the DA member there. So what do you make of all of this? Is this part and parcel of that we have a polarized society currently in South Africa?
I'm very happy with social media because I think what is happening in social media, we get a dipstick. I'm very happy with what is happening there. We get to understand that, in fact, this past 20-odd years, we've been just nice to each other, having tea and biscuits and so on, but the real issue has not been addressed. So these things, as they pop up in the social media, they actually give us we must thank social media because it has given us the true picture of what is happening. And in fact, that true picture has been happening, but we've not been maybe open to it. I mean, if you look right now, in terms of the management levels, as it were, at the top management of this country, despite the fact that black people are about 80%, but they only constitute only 13.6% of the top management. If you look at the ownership of this country, of the JSE, we're talking here of some 11 trillion rand stock exchange. In that, black people only own a meager 3% of that. So therefore, you have actually a racist economy, a racist society, and the social media has just reminded us that we have a job to do to dismantle racism.
So what then is the role of media in resolving these racial issues and these tensions that we have in our country?
Media has got to be fair, it's got to be objective. Media, when something is wrong, regardless of who's doing the wrong, they must exercise the same vigilance. Media mustn't just be vigilant when it's black people doing wrong. Give an example. Media has had South Africa believing that corruption is just a government and ANC phenomena. And yet we've got a lot of corruption in the private sector. We've had a 50 billion rand stolen by the private sector, and media probably spent a day on it. But media is quite happy to spend the whole year on 246 of Nkandla. I'm not saying what happened in Nkandla is correct. I'm merely talking about it. If you are going to spend a year talking about 246 million of Nkandla, then you must spend 5 years talking about the 50 billion that has been stolen by the construction sector. And they're not alone. It's construction sector 50 billion. If you go to SARS is going to tell you that, in fact, 250 billion is lost through transfer pricing and all kinds of schemes, as it were. But media does not show that, and all media is interested in is to rubbish black government, is to rubbish the ANC. That's all they're interested in. I think so. Media is part of the problem in creating stereotypes in society.
Now, as a person that has been on the receiving end of racism accusations, how does one then recover from such a storm?
For instance, you see, if it's a legitimate racism, I don't know how you recover. But if it's racism that has been concocted, which is not true, does not even affect you. So for me, not affected whatsoever, because I know that I was just a pawn and it was a political game being played. At the right time, by the way, I promised South Africa to clean up and set the record straight. But for now, just know that it doesn't touch me at all, because I never made anything racist. I never made any racist comment. People just concocted the story, put it out of context, and did all kinds of funny things. So for me, personally, I really have no issue. And as I say, that at the right time, after the elections, because just now I say something, then it gets used again in the election story. So after the elections, I promised South Africa to just set the record straight of what is it that I actually said, what is the context, and all of that.
As the Progressive Professionals Forum, I know we're running out of time, but just briefly, your message for South Africa in terms of how should we unite?
No, I think South Africa, the first thing, we must be honest. This is a problem. There's no honesty in South Africa. And I think it's better to hate each other with the truth than please each other with lies. Let's stop lying to each other. Let's first and foremost understand that the economic dispensation in South Africa is racist and face it and deal with it. And let also just open people's minds. White people in South Africa that own most of the wealth, they must really know that 10% of a particular size is much less than if you had a bigger cake. So the more black people you get into the economy, even that 10% will be much more meaningful.
Mr. Manye, thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
That was Mr. Jimmy Manye, the president of the Progressive Professionals Forum, joining us here in studio. It's now over to Yeben to go to Kimberley.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis. Now, the Minister of Transport, Dipuo Peters, is expected to hand over a torch of peace to the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, at Tetlanyo High School in Kimberley in the Northern Cape. This in support of the Education Department's Safer Schools campaign aimed at promoting general safety in schools. Scholar transport is one of the issues to be addressed. Now, the Minister of Transport herself joins us from a home time, I can add, in Kimberley. Very good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers of SABC.
They say Kimberley's finest export, not the diamonds, is our Minister of Transport. I just want to ask you about the significance today of the handing over and what's the message that you would like to send out with this?
I'm sure you know, and the people of South Africa are aware that we have got 365 days campaign that deals with violence against women and children, but also deals with road safety and safer schools. We are now, like the department received the torch on the 10th of December from the Department of Women. We're now handing it over to the Department of Basic Education to continue with the campaign of safety in particular in our schools, but also inculcating a sense of educating our people, our learners about the need to enhance safety. That is the reason why we are handing the torch over to basic education, to continue with the message of safety, but in particular to include it in the life skills training.
Scholar transport is a key focus for you today, but are you going to use this opportunity to talk wider road safety in schools, and do you think that should be part of a strategy going forward to have a bigger focus on road safety in our schools?
Yes, Eben, that is one of the focus that we are going to have. If you look at the figures of the festive period, it is actually worrying to note that the 0 to 8 and the 0 to 10 years are the most affected when it comes to the figures for pedestrians. So it means that the focus should be in teaching our children on how to be safe on the roads, from the lap of the mothers right to daycare, but in particular also in our schools. So when we say road safety is everybody's responsibility, it means as parents, as children, and as society, we've got a responsibility. We're also focusing on scholar transport. You know, children leave home at 5 in the morning to reach school at 8. When they get there, they are already exhausted. So the intention of scholar transport between the Department of Education and Transport is to make sure that we enhance the culture of learning and teaching. Children should not reach school exhausted and unable to learn. So that is one of the reasons we're looking into. We're also looking at bringing in the role of bicycles as an alternative means for those children also who can ride from less than 3 kilometers, less than 2 kilometers, less than 1 kilometer to school. Because we believe that it is education that is going to help us improve the chances of the children of South Africa to get out of poverty, to get out of inequality, and to be entrepreneurs and deal with unemployment also.
No, ma'am, unfortunately, we are the worst drink drivers in the world. That's what the World Health Organization tells us in a report that they released. We're also the worst binge drinkers. The only way to address this kind of behavior really is from a young age, starting in schools. Do you think South Africa needs to have a change of focus and maybe target those young people and make aware the dangers of drinking, driving, binge drinking and so forth in schools?
We're doing that, but we're also working with the Department of Health to make sure that at the point of testing blood for substance, we also focus on other substances like drugs because they also have a particular role. And that is why the Safer Schools program is also a combination of a partnership between the Department of Basic Education as well as the police to make sure that we can deal with the availability of drugs and alcohol to our children. But we're also appealing to our parents. I'm happy to indicate that the Department of Trade and Industry is busy reviewing the liquor policy. And as the Department of Health, the Department of Transport as well as the Department of Health and the Department of Social Services, we are also making our own inputs. From transport, we're saying we want to keep the people who sell alcohol responsible for the behavior of the people that they have sold alcohol to. Because when you give people alcohol or in excess, you must know that they are going to be a harm to themselves, be a harm to society, and your contribution must also be taken into consideration.
In conclusion, ma'am, do you think, I know you've called for this before, but do you think it's feasible for us to reclassify misbehavior or bad behavior on the roads to have heavier penalties and sentences like the rapes and murders that we see?
For the whole of last year, my department has been working with the Department of Justice to look at how and what should be done to get to that point. I'm happy to indicate that next week I will be meeting with the Minister of Justice to look at the proposals that comes from our Road Traffic Management Corporation as well as Road Traffic Infringement Agency as well as the NPA on how we could be able to amend the law to make it possible that people, especially those who speed excessively, those who are also caught drunk and on the roads, but also those who cause death on our roads. Because if you have caused the death of 18 people as an individual, you should be held responsible for those lives.
Absolutely, we agree, ma'am. All the best with the campaign. It's a fantastic campaign to make our schools safer. And if our schools are safer, it means that wider society becomes safer. Our roads become safer. That, of course, is our Transport Minister here in South Africa, Dipuo Peters, coming to us from Kimberley. She's in her hometown, really. She's a Kimberley native, a local from, the famous Diamond City here in South Africa. Now, I can tell you that this week we've carried a number of stories on the water crisis facing not only farmers but also rural communities here in central and northern parts of South Africa. In the Free State, there are a number of towns that have now been without running water for months. Residents from these towns rely entirely on water tankers organised by the municipality, the Defence Force and goodwill organisations and charities. One of these towns is Smithfield in the southeastern Free State. Now, residents here have been without water since November. Today, however, things are set to change for the better in Smithfield. And joining us now is our specialist correspondent, Richard Newton. Very good morning to you, Richard. Lovely to hear from you.
Morning, Eben.
A little bit dusty there, Richard. Just tell us what's happening there behind you.
Well, I can tell you we're here in Smithfield, founded 1848, has about 10,000 residents, just under 10,000 residents, and one of the growing number of towns that are struggling with the drought conditions, struggling to get water. And the town dam dried up a couple of months ago. There's no water coming in from the river, and they're relying totally on a handful of boreholes around the city and the town. And now, as you say behind me, what we're doing is drilling for water, looking for that absolute desperately needed resource. And we have this one sponsored by Gift of the Givers and at the hospital in Smithfield itself. So what they're trying to do is expand the water base to get water to the people who, for months now, have had to rely on water tankers coming in, Eben.
Tell us what the people are saying there in Smithfield, Richard, not just about the help that they're getting, but about the tough patch that they've just gone through.
Well, it's a really, really dry patch, and they've been very thankful for everyone who has contributed. I mean, today we're seeing this being drilled by Gift of the Givers, but over the last weeks we've seen water coming in from Pretoria, we've seen water coming in from other provinces, from PE. We've had individuals sending out calls for people to drop off water, and Operation Hydrate brought some 38,000 litres in the last couple of weeks to Smithfield. So this will take a lot of this borehole at the hospital will take a lot of stress off the other borehole of the town and be able to get a better supply of water for the people of the town, Eben.
Richard, now you mentioned a little bit earlier that this is an initiative by Gift of the Givers. Tell us a little bit about Gift of the Givers' involvement, and tell us about the campaign that they're running to try and help communities in peril.
Well, Eben, they're going all over, not only the province but the country. And here in the Free State, what they're doing is they're looking to sink a number of boreholes in towns where the need is absolutely desperate. They are also handing bottled water to people and helping wherever they can as far as that's concerned. But from here, they'll be going to a place like Fouriesburg to try and drill a borehole there to assist the town. And each place they go to, they will also be handing out bottled water to the community. They're trying to give the people at least a litre per person per day. Not always possible, but that's the least they're trying to do. And they tell me that when their trucks arrive, the people come running. They know they're going to be getting some help, and it's a great job they're doing. And also people across the country that have campaigns on Facebook, that have campaigns on other social media networks, and also going out there saying, guys, just bring water with you, drop it off at a petrol station in these towns, and people can pick it up. So it's Ubuntu, Eben. This is what we talk about when we talk about Ubuntu, people doing things for others. And we're seeing a lot of that in South Africa, not just in the Free State, but across the country where the need is so great.
Now we know the Free State have been battling really. Just, Richard, give us an idea of the areas that are worst affected in the Free State and what the kind of outlook is for the weeks and months to come.
Well, Eben, we're looking at the southern Free State, the southeastern Free State, as well as going into the northern area of the province. Western Free State really hit hard. We've had a bit of rain recently, but those areas where the rain fell, it immediately just absorbed into the ground. No puddles to be seen, as you would expect after heavy rainfall. So it's pretty much large portions of the Free State that need that help. And as I say, people are, individuals as well as organizations, as well as municipalities, really doing their best to do it. So if you hear those appeals coming out on social media or in your municipalities, do what you can, help out the people there. A bottle of water is worth its weight in gold in some of these towns we had, Eben, and we all need to appreciate those of us who do have running water, save where we can and help where we can.
No, Richard, it's a tough job that the Gift of the Givers are doing, but I saw in an earlier report that they're getting some assistance from big business. I saw Vodacom was giving them some money to help with these kinds of projects. Are they happy with the help that they're getting at Gift of the Givers, or can more be done?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of support coming in, and the more people see through programs like Newsroom that what is being done, the more they say, all right, I want to get involved, I want to help. And they can look at Gift of the Givers, their website, get involved in them, speak to them, say, look, I've got something I want to give you. I heard on the radio the other day someone who phoned in and said, I've got 2,000 cases of water I want to bring. Where can I take it? So it's great to see South Africans getting together and getting in touch with these organizations and those who are doing social media platforms, as well as just businesses, big businesses. I'm told tomorrow in Vicksburg there's a business that will be bringing in 10,000 bottles of water. So everyone's getting involved, and those who can, carry on doing it, because even if it rains today, it's going to take a while before our dams fill up and before there's enough water for everyone. So, Eben, big message to people out there. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for what you are doing. Let's keep it up.
Richard, thank you for the job that you're doing as well in very, very hot work, as you can see. Richard Newton is doing there. That is just outside the town of Smithfield in the southeastern parts of the Free State. He just explained to us, of course, they've gone through a very dry spell for the last 2 to 3 months almost. So wonderful work by Gift of the Givers as well. They donating bottled water, they're drilling boreholes, they're helping communities, hospitals, the like. If you can help, go to the Gift of the Givers website and make a contribution. Anything will help the cause. Time for us now to take a short commercial break. When we come back, Kendall Makamate will give us a complete sports update. See you then.
Funerals. It's part of the human journey. None of us are spared. In the unfortunate event of death, the last thing your family should have to worry about is money. That is why all clientele funeral plans pay out within 24 hours.
Coming up on Health Talk this Saturday, we discuss heat and health. We find out the reasons behind the current heat wave, how it affects the environment and human health, and most importantly, how we can protect ourselves from the heat. Join me, Dr. Sello Mataung, on Health Talk every Saturday at 9 a.m., where we focus on current health matters and give advice on healthy living.
Welcome back. This is a Sports on Newsroom, and I'm Kendall Makamate. The former head of World Athletics, Lamine Diack of Senegal, who stepped down last year after 16 years leading the IAAF, is being fingered as the man behind the cover-up of organized doping and blackmailing of athletes. Independent investigator Dick Pound is slamming governance at the International Association of Athletics Federation, but says the new president of the IAAF, Sebastian Coe, is the right man to bring change.
Pound's reports for the Independence Commission of the World Anti-Doping Agency added to a rapidly growing scandal involving organized doping. The former head of WADA released the first reports in November, which led to athletics superpower Russia being banned from competitions for state-sponsored doping. The latest report says among the failures of governance at IAAF were the employment of Diack's two sons as consultants.
The information the IC has very clearly indicates that the disruption of the Federation emanated.
Right, we're going to have to keep that one very short and cut out of it. The World Economic Forum's annual meetings brings together world leaders from business, government, international organizations, academia and civil society in Davos to discuss the global economy. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, was the lead minister for WEF, accompanied by other ministers, are holding a briefing session with Team South Africa Business. Now, we're going to be, as you know, we've been going back and forth to it, and we're going right there right now.
Very happy to report, which Mr. Mabuza, who's chair of BUSA, will also address and confirm, is that the interaction between government and business here also gave us a list of solutions, actions, initiatives that either individually or collectively we could take. And amongst them will be, how do we create optimism and confidence in this country? How do we ensure that we use both private sector resources and government resources to boost growth and investment? In particular, how do we create a new model of social cohesion in our country so that the huge divides of poverty and inequality are overcome not just as a government responsibility, but as a collective responsibility of all South Africans who have the means to contribute. And what was very encouraging is the high level of commitment that we saw from our business partners in this regard as well. So the message that we will be taking to Davos is one which says that South Africa is a very resilient country, that South Africa is a country that has many pluses. Its business infrastructure, its monetary policy, its fiscal policy, its advanced infrastructure, and very sophisticated South African businesses that other people could partner with and work with. But more importantly, South Africa still is a very attractive destination for countries who want to establish manufacturing and other plants here or expand existing plants, but extend their operations on the African continent as well. And Africa remains still an important growth story and positive for business opportunities as well. When we get back, we've given a commitment that we'll get together again and pick up on our experiences in Davos and ask ourselves in more concrete terms, well, what is our collective action plan to take South Africa's growth and development story in a very different direction? And what is encouraging is that this is the beginning of a process that will bring all social partners together, because that is what the President wants to do, in now a much more concrete and actionable way, so that we can show South Africans that we are focusing on our areas of agreement and less on our areas of disagreement. And around our agreements, we want to build a solid program of action which is based on the National Development Plan. Mr. Mabuza.
Ladies and gentlemen, Minister, there isn't much I can add to what you've just said, other than to concur that there is also recognition that the challenges that face us, we would have to have some trade-offs. There would be a need for us to take some pain. There would be a need for us to look at issues of governance architecture. As a business, as an example, the whole structure of NEDLAC does need a review. This painstaking, these trade-offs are trade-offs between business, government, and labor that we'd have to embark on. But as we go to Davos also, to also recognize that, and an example was made earlier, that last year when we were at Davos, the big question was our energy, our power outages. I think it's a good time to go back and report to Davos that since then, and it's not that we did not have so many days of outages, is to say our renewable energy IPP is not only the best in Africa, it's one of the top 3 in the world in terms of sustainability. The amount of megawatts we've added on the grid. So yes, we do have challenges, but we do have the confidence as South Africans that like many challenges we faced before, we will have to rise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Only 3 or 4.
Minister, going to Davos, I mean, what are you going to say to investors and international companies who ask you about the political uncertainty in South Africa? I mean, we saw the shuffling of your position, and I mean, there is questions about legislation like the private securities bill that is to be signed in. I mean, there seems to be not a lot of certainty about policy direction. So, what will you say to re-encourage those people? And also, I mean, the fall of our currency. I mean, is there anything you can say to them to assure them that they can still bring their money here without it losing another 40% in 2 years?
You know, when you compare ourselves to the situation in America where President Obama is forced to cry in the public in relation to the gun story, you will realize that we are a very stable country. Yes, we are going to have ups and downs every now and again, but it doesn't mean that our ship is about to sink. It merely means that we've met some turbulence, some things have happened, take that in our stride and move on. The securities bill, for example, it's been delayed because the President is applying his mind to whether that's the right thing to do, whether we've taken all of the concerns into account, and I'm sure at the end of the day we'll emerge with the right answer. But we must also be careful that strong, powerful, and talkative lobbies don't attract attention to 1 or 2 issues which is in their own self-interest. We must also ask ourselves what is in the interest of South Africa as a country and what will serve all 55 million people in South Africa. So that's what we are focusing our minds on. On the question of the currency, again, let me repeat what I've been saying for the last few days, which is that we have a terrible global climate at the moment. There's few bright sparks in the United States, in the UK, very minimal sparks in the EU of growth, and we're all familiar with some of the challenges that big developing countries like China are facing. At the same time, we know that 3 or 2 of the BRICS countries find themselves in a recession as well. So that has led to a particularly negative approach to emerging markets, which we think is totally unjustified. If we talk about globalization, then the globe as a whole, developed and developing, needs to once again learn to cooperate as it did in 2008, 2009. and ask itself, how will it create a stable environment in which both developed and developing can grow again and serve the people of those countries, but importantly, become part of the global trade, exchange and development process as well. The other factor that's impacting on us is that we are a commodity producing and exporting country. Now, we've repeated that many times. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you don't cover that adequately and explain to the people out there what does that actually mean. But it means that when you have lower commodity demand, we have low prices on the commodity side, the currencies will have some levels of volatility. And in our case, the currency is an important shock absorber. In other words, we don't have to spend billions of rands trying to defend the currency. It will go up and down. But we also know that speculative activity of the wrong kind, as happened earlier in the week and over the weekend, can also result in, let's call it, flashes. And those flashes are not helpful, because there's new ways of trading all of these things that have been developed that are based on sophisticated computerware. And we've got to ask some tough questions. So you'll know that amongst the nominees for the Oscars is The Big Short, written by Michael Lewis. How many of you have read it? You. Okay? But that explains to you what happened in the 2008. What caused it? How did the housing mortgage situation in the United States, which was then packaged as derivatives, and how did the ratings agencies, the same ones who hold us accountable, give AAA ratings to products that were in fact basically defective? And that resulted in 1 million people losing their jobs in South Africa. So next time when I see you, you're going to tell me whether you bought it and read it. Okay.
One more question, please.
When it comes to the theme of the Davos meeting, it's around reindustrialization. And South Africa, everybody is focused on black industrialization or black industrialists. What is the message around that?
Mr. Mabuza is an expert on that matter. but the bottom line is that we as South Africa also, and you can see from the manufacturing numbers, we're in trouble in that particular sector. So we need some kind of boost, some kind of revival. We need a search for new markets so that we can sell what we are producing. We need new levels of innovation. We need more commitment to research and development, both from the government side and the private sector side as well. Because unless you produce things that people want, you can't trade at the end of the day. And whether you're black or white or any other color industrialist, you're not producing anything that can actually grow your business. So he'll give you the details. But South Africa is the most sophisticated industrial base on the African continent, notwithstanding the difficulties that we have. The question for us and the business sector is, how do you build on that? And how do you energize it? And how do you expand it? And how do you assist other parts of Africa to build up their manufacturing industries as well? And in particular, how do we increase regional integration on our side? But he'll expand on some of this.
Minister, just briefly, yes, the theme is the fourth industrial revolution at WEF. Africa is industrializing. South Africa is the largest industrialized country on the continent. We have recognized that there's need to go into areas like disruptive technology, but we also do not think the answer is some policy prescription from elsewhere. We have addressed issues of our own policy certainties in the country. We have in the DTI some kind of mechanism that is being put in place to have some one-stop to deal with issues like immigration, to deal with issues like environmental impact analysis. And the automotive sector is another example. In the pharmaceutical sector, companies like Johnson & Johnson, for instance, or Unilever, as an example, the chief executive says they have taken a view that they'll only open global plants in 30 countries. 5 of those they've opened in South Africa. 5 out of the 30 they were going to open globally. So I would also ask South Africans and members of the media to help us. There is this document that was published in Business Day yesterday, the Oxford Business Group report. I think it's worth reading. We are not going to sweep under the carpet our challenges, But it is worth reading because there are some good things that we're doing. The Minister is right. We need to build on the social cohesion, give our people hope, give them confidence that things will be right. It's not going to be today. Take pains, take trade-offs, but I've got my shades on. My future is bright. I'm not talking about my history. My future is bright.
So one of the challenges with the Davos theme is that we're reaching a point in some countries where technology replacement of human beings is resulting in structural joblessness. So that's an issue for the next 15, 20 years that we need to take account as well. I remember an edition of The Economist some time ago which talked about large numbers of people who will not have conventional jobs as we know them. So how does society and governments and so on look after them is one of the challenges. So technology alone in a limitless way doesn't have all of the solutions. So if you're now talking about driverless cars, what are you guys going to do with your hands?
Machine to machine.
And so on and so on. So there's the flip side of technology that we need to look at carefully. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Minister.
That concludes the briefing by the Minister of Finance, Minister Pravin Gordhan, with the President of BUSA, Jabu Mabuza, giving us an update, really, of the meeting that we just had with various stakeholders. Earlier on, there was President Jacob Zuma, who chaired the meeting, talking about challenges and solutions. They are marshalling the forces to Davos. They are carrying one message: South Africa is open for business. It's back to the studio.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned.
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened.
I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't. Who are you asking? You're looking at me?
Yes, Abeda, I'm talking to you.
So the old fuddy-duddies like Dennis and me will remain there?
I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about... Damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
So much more than just the Legal and Rights show. Join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Morning Live sets the agenda for the day. We bring you the latest local and international news. We are on the ball with all your sports activities and results. We give you the latest business update.
We bring you the latest weather every time.
Watch Morning Live every weekday morning at 6 o'clock, bringing you everything you need to know before you go. Shap shap, tada.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon, only on the SABC News channel.
Coming up on Health Talk this Saturday, we discuss heat and health. We find out the reasons behind the current heat wave, how it affects the environment and human health, and most importantly, how we can protect ourselves from the heat. Join me, Dr. Sello Mutaung, on Health Talk every Saturday at 9 a.m., where we focus on current health matters and give advice on healthy living.